The wedding bells rang through the estate like a death knell. Elara Vance stood at the cathedral's back entrance, one hand pressed against the cold stone wall, the other resting on her stomach, still flat, still hiding what no one could know. Through the half-open door, she watched Adrian Thorne, Duke of Greymont, slide a ring onto her sister's finger, the same hands that had traced promises across her skin 3 months ago. She didn't scream, didn't collapse. She simply turned, walked down the servants' stairs, and vanished. But this story is about what happened next. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this tale travels. The carriage lurched over another rut in the road, and Elara gripped the worn leather strap above her head to keep from being thrown against the side panel. The driver hadn't spoken in 3 hours. She'd paid him extra for that silence, and the steady rhythm of hooves on packed dirt was the only sound besides her own breathing. She pressed her palm against her abdomen again. Still nothing. No curve, no movement. Just the faint nausea that had plagued her for 2 weeks, and the doctor's quiet confirmation that had shattered what remained of her world. 6 weeks along, Miss Vance. Congratulations are in order, I assume. She'd left his office without answering. That had been 4 days ago. 4 days before the wedding. 4 days before she'd realized that Adrian Thorne had never intended to make good on the promises whispered in darkened alcoves and stolen moments in the rose garden. 4 days before she understood that her sister Isadora, sweet, perfect Isadora, had won something Elara hadn't even known they were competing for. The northern provinces spread out before her like a punishment. Gray skies, grayer rocks, and mile after mile of wind-bent grass that looked sharp enough to draw blood. This wasn't the manicured elegance of the Vance family estates, where even the wildflowers grew in tasteful arrangements. This was raw country, the kind of place people only mentioned when discussing exile or early death. Perfect. How much further? She called up to the driver. Cross Hill's another 2 hours, miss. You sure about this? She didn't answer. She wasn't sure about anything except that she couldn't go back. The memory of Adrian's face kept intruding, not from the wedding, but from 3 months earlier in the library after the summer ball, his hand cupping her jaw, thumb tracing her cheekbone. I'll speak to your father next week, he'd said. I won't wait any longer. She'd believed him. That was the part that made her stomach twist, that made shame burn hotter than anger. She'd actually believed that a duke, a man who owned half the northern counties and commanded enough political influence to sway parliament, had meant those words for her. Elara Vance, the second daughter, the one with the sharp tongue and sharper opinions, who'd scandalized the ladies' circle by actually reading philosophy instead of just decorating her shelves with leather-bound volumes she'd never open. The one who, apparently, was convenient enough to seduce but not quite suitable enough to marry. The carriage hit another pothole, and this time her head cracked against the wooden frame. She tasted blood, bit her tongue. The pain felt appropriate somehow, like penance for her own stupidity. Miss? The driver's voice filtered down. You all right back there? Fine. The word came out harder than she'd intended. She wasn't fine. She was 23 years old, pregnant, unmarried, and traveling toward the kind of nothing that most people in her social class only read about in cautionary novels. But fine was what you said when the alternative was admitting that your entire life had just collapsed like a house of cards in a strong wind. The worst part, the part that kept circling back no matter how hard she tried to push it away, was that she'd seen Isadora the morning of the wedding. Her sister had come to her room while the maids were still preparing the ceremony flowers, wearing a dressing gown that probably cost more than most families earned in a year. Elara, she'd said, and there'd been something in her voice. Not triumph, exactly. Something softer and somehow worse. I wanted you to hear it from me first, before the announcement. I already know, Elara had replied, not looking up from the single bag she was packing. Congratulations. It's not... Isadora had stopped, started again. Father arranged it. You know how these things work. And that had been the moment Elara had understood. Because yes, she did know how these things worked. Marriages in their world were transactions, carefully negotiated mergers of property and influence. Love was incidental at best, irrelevant at worst. But Adrian had made her believe otherwise. I don't care what your father thinks, he'd told her, fingers tangled in her hair, mouth hot against her throat. I don't care what anyone thinks. I want you. Apparently, he'd cared enough to marry her sister instead. "Cross Hill, miss." The driver's voice cut through her thoughts. She pushed aside the leather curtain and looked out. The village, if you could even call it that, consisted of maybe 30 buildings scattered across a hillside like dice thrown by an indifferent hand. Stone cottages with thatched roofs, a single church with a crooked steeple, something that might have been an inn judging by the faded sign swinging in the wind. Mud streets, chickens scratching in yards. A few faces turning to watch the carriage roll in, curious, suspicious. The kind of looks that said strangers weren't common and weren't particularly welcome. This was it. The end of the road, literally and figuratively. The carriage stopped in front of the inn, and Elara climbed out before the driver could offer assistance. Her legs shook. From the journey or from fear, she couldn't tell. Didn't matter. "You want me to wait?" the driver asked, and she heard the real question underneath. "Are you sure you want to stay here?" "No." She handed him the last of her coins, more than they'd agreed on. "Thank you." He pocketed the money but didn't leave immediately. "Miss, I don't mean to pry, but—" "Then don't." He nodded slowly, clicked his tongue at the horses, and the carriage rolled away. Elara watched it disappear around the bend, taking with it her last physical connection to the life she'd known, the life that had discarded her. The inn's door opened and a woman emerged, late 40s, built like someone who'd spent decades wrestling livestock and weather into submission. She looked Elara up and down with the kind of frank assessment that would have been unthinkably rude in a London drawing room. "Need a room?" The woman's accent was thick, vowels rounded in ways that marked her as northern-born. "Yes, and information, if you have it. Information costs same as the room, 2 shillings a night, meals included. Information depends on what you're asking." Elara reached into her bag, felt the thin stack of bills that represented everything she'd managed to convert into cash before leaving. Not much. Certainly not enough to support her for more than a few months, even in a place like this. She'd have to find work. The thought would have been laughable a week ago. Now it was just reality. "I'm looking for a place to stay," she said. "Longer term, and possibly employment." The woman's eyebrows rose. "Employment? Doing what?" Good question. Elara's education had prepared her to manage a household staff, organize charity galas, make polite conversation in 3 languages, and play passable piano. None of which seemed particularly useful for survival in Cross Hill. "I can read and write," she said. "I can do figures. She stopped, recalibrated. "I'm willing to learn whatever needs learning." The woman studied her for a long moment, and Elara forced herself to meet that gaze without flinching. Whatever the innkeeper saw seemed to satisfy some internal criteria, because she finally nodded. "Martha Brennan," she said, not offering her hand. "I run this place. You got a name?" Elara hesitated. She'd thought about this during the journey, whether to use her real name or invent something new. Start completely fresh. But lies had brought her here, and she found she didn't have the stomach for adding more. "Elara," she said. "Elara Vance?" If Martha recognized the name, she didn't show it. "Well, Elara Vance, I can give you a room and meals for a week while you figure yourself out. After that, we'll talk about what comes next. Fair?" It was more than fair. It was generous, bordering on suspicious, and Elara's first instinct was to question the offer. But she was tired, bone-deep exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with the journey, and her options were limited enough that she couldn't afford to be choosy. "Fair," she agreed. The room was small. A narrow bed, a washstand, a single window that looked out over the hillside. The floorboards creaked when she walked, and there was a draft coming from somewhere she couldn't identify. It was, objectively, the worst accommodation she'd ever been offered. She sat on the bed and allowed herself exactly 5 minutes. 5 minutes to let the enormity of what she'd done wash over her. 5 minutes to acknowledge the fear, the shame, the grief for the life she'd lost. Then she stood up, unpacked her single bag, and went downstairs to ask Martha what work needed doing. 3 months later, the winter came early and stayed late, settling over Cross Hill like a cold that wouldn't break. Elara learned to bank fires so they'd last through the night, to read weather in the taste of the air, to move through the inn's kitchen without getting in Martha's way. She learned which travelers paid well and which ones would argue over every penny, how to deflect unwanted attention without causing offense, when to speak, and when silence served better. She learned to be invisible. Her pregnancy progressed in secret. The loose dresses helped, the constant motion, the fact that no one here knew her well enough to notice subtle changes. Martha might have suspected. The older woman was sharp-eyed and missed little, but if she did, she kept it to herself. Elara's body betrayed her in small ways. The exhaustion that hit like a physical weight around mid-afternoon. The way certain smells made her stomach rebel. The growing awareness of something else taking up space inside her. Something that kicked and shifted and refused to let her forget, even for a moment, the consequences of choices made in rose-scented darkness. She tried not to think about Adrian. Failed consistently. Late at night, when the inn grew quiet and sleep wouldn't come, she'd replay their last real conversation. Not the wedding. She refused to count watching him marry her sister as a conversation. But 2 weeks before that, in the conservatory after her mother's birthday dinner, he'd seemed distracted, troubled. She'd attributed it to political concerns. He'd been dealing with some dispute over northern mining rights. But looking back, she wondered if he'd already known. If he'd already made his choice and was working up the courage to tell her. "Is something wrong?" she'd asked. "No." He'd pulled her close, kissed her forehead. "Just tired." Liar. They were both liars, it turned out. She'd lied when she said she didn't care about his title, about the difference in their positions. He'd lied when he said it didn't matter. In March, when her dresses wouldn't hide the truth any longer, she told Martha. The innkeeper had been kneading bread dough, her capable hands working the mixture with practiced efficiency. She didn't stop when Elara spoke, didn't even look up. "How far along?" 5 months. "Father?" "Gone." Martha's hands stilled. She dusted flour from her fingers and finally met Elara's eyes. "Gone as in dead, or gone as in ran?" "Neither. Gone as in never knew and never will." A long silence. Outside, wind rattled the windows, carrying the promise of more snow. "You planning to keep it?" Martha asked. The question startled her. "Yes." "Then you'll need help." "Baby doesn't care if you're ready or not. Doesn't care if you've got money or plans or any damn thing. Just comes when it's time." Martha turned back to her bread. "We'll figure it out." The casual acceptance of it, the complete lack of judgment or prying questions, nearly broke Elara's carefully maintained composure. She'd expected condemnation, or at minimum the kind of pitying disapproval she'd have gotten from anyone in her old life. Instead, Martha just went back to kneading dough as if they'd discussed nothing more significant than next week's menu. "Thank you," Elara managed. "Don't thank me yet. Childbirth's no joke, and doing it without a husband to help support you makes it harder. You sure about this?" Was she? Elara touched her stomach, felt the responding movement beneath her palm. She'd been angry at first, angry at the timing, at the cosmic joke of it, at one more way her body had betrayed her careful plans. But somewhere during the long winter nights, anger had transmuted into something else. Not love exactly, more like stubborn determination. This child was hers. Entirely, completely hers. No one could take that away or use it as leverage or bargaining chip. "I'm sure," she said. The twins came in early May during a thunderstorm that knocked out power to half the village. Elara labored for 16 hours, attended by Martha and the local midwife, a grim-faced woman named Agnes who delivered half the babies in Crosshill and lost count of how many mothers she'd saved from doctors who didn't know better than to interfere. "Breathe," Agnes commanded, and Elara wanted to laugh because what else was she doing? But she breathed and pushed and screamed when the pain got too intense for silence. The first baby, a boy, came at dawn. The second, a girl, followed 20 minutes later, as if she'd been waiting to make sure her brother was all right before risking the journey herself. Elara held them both, these impossibly tiny creatures who'd managed to survive her grief and anger and fear. They had Adrian's dark hair and her gray eyes. The boy had a birthmark on his left shoulder blade. The girl had fingers so small and perfect they didn't seem real. "Names?" Martha asked. She'd thought about this during the long months. Avoided it, actually, because naming them made it real in a way that even the pregnancy hadn't. But now, looking at their small faces, the answer came easily. "Rowan," she said, touching her son's cheek. "And Lelia." "Good, strong names," Agnes approved. "They'll need them, growing up without a father." Elara didn't respond. Her children would grow up without a father's name or support, true, but they'd have something Adrian had never had. A mother who chose them first. Always. 5 years later, Rowan had his father's stubborn streak, and Lelia had inherited Elara's tendency to ask questions no one wanted to answer. Together, they were a force of nature that even Cross Hill's harsh conditions couldn't fully tame. "Mama, why don't we have a papa?" Lelia asked one morning, helping Elara hang laundry in the pre-dawn cold. Elara's hands stilled on the clothesline. She'd known this question would come eventually, had prepared answers, discarded them, prepared new ones. "Your papa lives far away," she said finally. "He doesn't know about you." "Why not?" "Because sometimes people make mistakes. Sometimes they don't know about the good things that come from those mistakes." Lilia considered this with the seriousness of a 5-year-old philosopher. "Could we tell him?" "No, love." "Why?" "Because—" Elara stopped. "Because your father married my sister. Because he chose political advantage over me. Because I can't bear the thought of him looking at you and seeing obligation instead of joy. Because some things are better left alone." It wasn't a good answer, but it was the only one she had. The school started almost by accident. One of the village mothers, struggling to teach her daughter letters, had asked Elara for help. Then another asked, and another. Before she quite understood how it had happened, Elara was spending mornings in the church basement, teaching reading and figures to a dozen children whose parents couldn't afford tutors. She didn't charge. Couldn't, really, when most families paid her in eggs or bread or help with repairs on the small cottage she'd eventually been able to rent. But the work filled something in her, some hollow space that motherhood alone couldn't reach. Besides, teaching meant Rowan and Lelia grew up surrounded by other children, learning to read alongside them, absorbing the communal nature of survival in a place like Cross Hill. It was so far removed from her own childhood: private tutors, separate lessons for sons and daughters of the gentry, the constant awareness of social hierarchy, that sometimes she barely recognized herself in the woman she'd become. The past receded like a tide going out. Weeks would pass without her thinking of Adrian, of Isadora, of the life she'd left behind. She grew strong in ways that had nothing to do with physical strength, learned to weather disappointment without breaking, to find satisfaction in small victories, to measure worth in things that couldn't be bought or inherited. If she sometimes woke in the night with her heart pounding and tears on her face, if she sometimes watched her children sleep and wondered what kind of man their father had become, if she sometimes caught herself searching dark-haired strangers' faces for familiar features, well, that was the price of the choices she'd made. She'd pay it. Spring came late in Elara's 7th year in Cross Hill, arriving in fits and starts like something that couldn't quite commit. The children had just finished morning lessons when Martha appeared in the church doorway, her expression carefully neutral in a way that immediately set off alarm bells. "Elara, word." Elara dismissed the students and followed Martha outside. The older woman led her away from the church, out toward the edge of the village where conversations wouldn't be overheard. "There's a man at the inn," Martha said without preamble, asking questions. Elara's stomach dropped. What kind of questions? The kind about a woman who showed up 7 years ago, alone and pregnant. The kind about where she might have come from and why she might have left. Martha paused. "He's got money. Nice clothes, nice horse, the kind of nice that stands out around here. And he's got a seal on his letters, Duchy seal, if I'm not mistaken." The world tilted. Elara grabbed Martha's arm to steady herself. "Did he give a name?" "Callum Thorne. Not Adrian, but close enough. Adrian's younger brother, the one who'd always treated her with careful courtesy at social functions, who'd once told her he admired her mind more than her sister's perfect manners. "What did you tell him?" Elara asked. "Nothing yet. Told him I'd need to check with the woman he's describing, see if she's willing to receive visitors. He's waiting for my answer." Martha's eyes were sharp. "You want me to send him away?" Did she? Elara's first instinct was yes. Send him away, deny everything, protect the life she'd built through sheer stubborn will. But Callum was Adrian's brother. He wouldn't have traveled this far, asked these questions, without reason. Something had happened, something bad enough to justify tracking her down after 7 years of silence. "No," she heard herself say. "Tell him I'll meet him, but not at the inn. The old oak grove, east of the village, 1 hour." Martha nodded and headed back toward the inn. Elara stood frozen for a moment, then forced herself to move. She had to collect Rowan and Lelia from the cottage, where they were supposed to be helping with afternoon chores, had to figure out what to tell them, had to, no, stop, think. She took a breath, then another. Whatever news Callum brought, whatever had finally dragged her past back into the present, she'd face it the same way she'd faced everything else, head on, without apology. The oak grove was private enough that they wouldn't be interrupted, but public enough that she felt safe. Elara arrived early, positioning herself with her back to the largest tree, giving herself the advantage of seeing him approach. He came precisely on time, picking his way through the underbrush with the careful steps of someone unaccustomed to rough terrain. He'd aged well, still handsome in that polished aristocratic way, though there were new lines around his eyes and a tightness to his mouth that spoke of recent stress. He saw her and stopped, relief washing over his features so clearly that Elara felt a stab of guilt. He'd been worried she wouldn't come, worried perhaps that she'd vanish so completely he'd never find her. "Elara," he said, and there was something in his voice, sorrow, maybe, or regret. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." "What do you want, Callum?" He flinched at her directness. "Straight to business, then. We're not friends. We were barely acquaintances, so yes, straight to business." He nodded slowly, accepting the rebuke. "Isadora is dead." The words hung in the air between them. Elara waited for grief, for shock, for something. Instead, she felt only a strange numbness, as if he'd told her about a character from a novel rather than her own sister. "When?" she asked. 6 months ago. Complications from childbirth. The baby, a daughter, survived. Isadora had been pregnant, had given Adrian the legitimate heir that Elara's children could never be. The irony was so sharp it hurt. "I'm sorry," she said, because it seemed like the thing to say. "Are you?" Callum's tone wasn't accusatory, just curious. "I don't know," Elara admitted. "We weren't close. After—" She stopped. "After everything. After she married Adrian." "Yes." Callum moved closer, careful to maintain respectful distance. "Did you know, before you left?" "Did I know what?" "That the marriage was arranged, that Adrian didn't choose her, that your father threatened to expose certain business dealings. Unless Adrian agreed to take Isadora instead of you." The grove spun. Elara pressed her palm against the tree trunk, needing something solid to anchor her. "What? You didn't know?" Callum's expression shifted to something like pity. "Elara, Adrian spent 3 months trying to find you after you disappeared. He searched everywhere, hired investigators, called in every favor he had. Your father told him you'd run off with a French diplomat, wanted nothing more to do with the family. It nearly destroyed Adrian when he— Stop!" Elara held up her hand. "Stop talking." Her mind raced, trying to process what he'd said. Arranged, blackmailed. Adrian had searched for her. Her father had lied. None of it made sense. Or rather, it made perfect, horrible sense, and she'd spent 7 years hating the wrong person. "Why are you telling me this now?" she asked. Callum hesitated. "Because Adrian is coming here. He found out. I don't know how, but he discovered that you're alive, that you're here. He'll arrive within the week." "No." The word came out sharper than she'd intended. He can't come here. I came ahead to warn you, to give you time to prepare, or leave if you'd rather." "I have children, Callum." The words stopped him cold. His eyes widened, and she watched understanding dawn. "Children," he repeated slowly. "How many?" "Twins. A boy and a girl. They're 6 years old." She met his gaze steadily. "They have dark hair and gray eyes, and I will not have them become pawns in whatever game brought you here." Callum was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was gentle. "They're Adrian's. They're mine. Does he know?" "No, and he won't. I'm serious, Callum. I'll disappear again before I let him anywhere near them." "Would that be so terrible?" Callum asked. "They're his children, too. He has a right—" "Rights?" Elara laughed, and it came out bitter. "He married my sister, raised her child as his heir, built a life that had no room for me in it. I don't care if he was blackmailed or threatened or forced at sword point. He made his choice, and so did I. My children don't need a father who'll see them as obligations or embarrassments." "You don't know that." "Don't I?" They stared at each other, and Elara felt 7 years of carefully constructed walls threatening to crack. She couldn't do this. Couldn't face Adrian, couldn't risk her children's stability for the sake of some belated honesty. "When does he arrive?" she asked. 4 days? Maybe 5? The roads are bad this time of year. 4 days. Not much time to decide whether to run or stand her ground. Not much time to figure out how to protect Rowan and Lelia from the truth of who their father was. "Thank you for the warning," she said. "Now leave." Elara, "Leave, Callum, please." He nodded slowly, then pulled something from his coat pocket. A letter, sealed with the duchy crest. "If you change your mind, if you want to hear his side before he arrives, it's all in here. Everything he wanted to say to you 7 years ago, but never got the chance." He set the letter on a nearby rock and walked away. Elara watched him go, then stared at the letter like it might bite her. She should burn it. Should walk away right now, gather her children, and disappear into the northern wastes where not even a duke's resources could find her. Instead, she picked up the letter and broke the seal. Elara. The letter felt heavier than paper should. Elara stood in the oak grove for what might have been minutes or hours, the broken seal catching afternoon light, and realized her hands were shaking. She didn't read it there. Couldn't. Instead, she folded it carefully, tucked it inside her coat, and walked back toward the cottage with the kind of deliberate calm that came from pure necessity. One foot in front of the other. Breathe in, breathe out. Don't think about what the words inside might say. Don't think about Adrian arriving in 4 days. Don't think at all. Rowan and Lilia were in the yard when she arrived, engaged in some elaborate game involving sticks and a very patient barn cat. They looked up when she approached, and Elara forced her face into something resembling normalcy. "Mama, we built a fort," Lilia announced, pointing to a structure that defied several laws of physics and probably wouldn't survive a strong breeze. "It's magnificent," Elara said, and meant it. "But it's getting dark. Inside, both of you. Wash up for supper." They went without argument, a minor miracle that told her she must look worse than she'd thought. Children had radar for parental distress, could smell fear like animals scenting smoke. She waited until they were inside, until she heard water running and Lilia's voice raised in some story about the cat's secret adventures. Then she pulled out the letter and read it by the last of the daylight. "Elara, if you're reading this, then Callum found you, and you didn't immediately burn what I've written. I'll consider that progress, though I have no right to expect even that much. I don't know how to do this. I've written this letter 17 times, and each version sounds more pathetic than the last. But here's what I know. Your father came to me 3 days before I was supposed to ask for your hand. He had documents, proof of financial dealings that would have ruined my family, destroyed the duchy, put people I'm responsible for out in the cold. He offered me a choice, marry Isadora or watch everything burn. I told him to go to hell. Spent 2 days trying to find a way out, calling in every favor, hiring lawyers, threatening countersuits. None of it mattered. He had me cornered, and he knew it. The night before the wedding, I came to find you, to tell you everything, to ask you to wait while I figured out how to fix this. Your maid said you'd left that afternoon. No note, no word, just gone. I didn't believe her. I tore apart your room looking for some explanation, some clue, found nothing. I married Isadora the next day because 200 families depend on the duchy for their livelihoods, and I couldn't let them suffer for my mistakes. But I looked for you. For months I searched. Your father told me you'd run off with a French diplomat named Laurent Beaumont, that you'd written saying you never wanted to see any of us again. I hired investigators anyway. They found nothing. It was like you'd vanished from the earth. Eventually, I stopped looking. Not because I stopped caring, but because I had a wife who deserved better than a husband who was clearly in love with someone else. Isadora knew, I think. She never said it directly, but there were moments. Small kindnesses that felt like apologies for winning a game she'd never asked to play. She died 6 months ago. The baby survived, thank God, but Isadora didn't. And now I'm raising a daughter alone, trying to figure out how to be a father worth having, and all I can think about is that I failed you 7 years ago in every way that mattered. Callum found evidence recently, correspondence between your father and Beaumont, proving the diplomat story was fabricated. You never left with anyone, you just left. And I need to know why. I'm coming to find you. Not because I think I deserve answers, but because I owe you the truth you should have had 7 years ago. Because I made promises I couldn't keep, and I need you to know it wasn't by choice. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything. But I'm coming anyway. Adrian. Elara read it twice, then a third time, looking for the lie. The manipulation. The excuse that would let her hold on to the anger that had sustained her through pregnancy, childbirth, and 7 years of single motherhood. She didn't find it. The worst part was that she believed him. Every word. She'd known her father was ambitious, had watched him maneuver her sister into increasingly advantageous social positions. But this, blackmail, fabricated evidence, destroying his own daughter's life for political gain, this was beyond what she'd imagined him capable of. Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe she'd just never wanted to look closely enough to see it. She burned the letter in the kitchen stove, watching Adrian's careful handwriting curl and blacken. The words were already carved into her memory. She didn't need the physical evidence. What she needed was time to think, to plan, to figure out what the hell she was going to do when he arrived. 4 days. 3 now, effectively, since Callum had delivered his warning this afternoon. "Mama?" Rowan's voice came from the doorway. "You're burning paper. We're supposed to save paper." This was old, she said. Not worth saving. He accepted this with the easy trust of a 6-year-old. "Are we having stew again?" "Yes." "Lilia says she'll trade me her bread for my carrots." "Lilia needs to eat her bread." "That's what I told her." He wandered back toward the main room, calling his sister a terrible negotiator in the process. Elara pressed her palms against the stove's warmth and tried to organize her thoughts. Options. She could run again, take the children and disappear deeper into the northern territories. She could stay and refuse to see Adrian when he arrived. She could meet with him, but keep the children hidden. She could, what? Tell him the truth? Hand him 2 children he'd never asked for, who would complicate his life and his new daughter's inheritance? Rowan and Lilia had built a life here, had friends, had stability. What right did she have to upend that because their father had finally learned he'd been lied to? She served dinner in a fog, barely tasting the food, responding to the children's chatter with automatic noises of agreement. Lilia noticed first, "Mama, you're being weird." "I'm tired, love." "You're always tired." Lilia's gray eyes, so like Elara's own, but with Adrian's intensity, studied her face. "Did something bad happen?" Too perceptive by half. "No, just thinking about boring adult things. Like taxes." "Exactly like taxes." Rowan made a face. "Uncle Thomas says taxes are theft." "Uncle Thomas says a lot of things." Thomas was the blacksmith, no actual relation, but the children had adopted half the village as honorary family. "Finish your carrots." After she'd put them to bed, a process that involved 2 stories, 3 glasses of water, and Rowan's sudden conviction that there was definitely something living under his bed, Elara sat at the small kitchen table and forced herself to think practically. Running wasn't really an option. She had maybe 20 pounds saved, not enough to get far or sustain them long. More importantly, running would raise questions among the villagers who'd become her community. Martha would want to know why. The children would demand explanations she wasn't prepared to give. Staying and hiding the children was equally untenable. Cross Hill was too small, too interconnected. If Adrian came asking questions, someone would mention the teacher's twins. And if he saw them, dark hair, gray eyes, the right age, he'd know. Even if he didn't want to know, he'd know. Which left only one option, really, the one she'd been avoiding because it terrified her more than poverty or scandal or anything else she'd faced in the past 7 years. She'd have to tell him first. The decision, once made, should have brought relief. Instead, it sat in her chest like a stone. She'd spent so long building walls against the past, against the part of herself that had loved Adrian Thorne and believed in his promises. Taking those walls down felt dangerous, like inviting a flood she might not survive. But keeping them up felt worse. Felt like cowardice. The next morning she told Martha everything. Not in the inn where they might be overheard, but during the early walk to the well that had become their routine. Martha listened without interrupting, her face giving nothing away, until Elara finally ran out of words. "So the Duke is the father," Martha said, "and he's on his way here." "Yes." "And you're planning to tell him about the twins before he figures it out himself?" "I think I have to." Martha was quiet for a long moment, bucket swinging from her hand. You know what happens when men like that find out about bastard children, don't you? The word hit like a slap, even though Elara had used it herself in darker moments. I know. They take them. Maybe not right away, but eventually. They've got lawyers and money and respectability. And you've got none of those things. He could take those babies from you, and there's not a damn thing you could do about it. He wouldn't. You don't know what he'd do. You knew him 7 years ago for what? A few months? People change. Grief changes people. Losing a wife, raising a daughter alone, that changes a man. You can't predict what he'll want. Elara stopped walking. Then what would you do? Me? Martha set down the bucket and turned to face her squarely. I'd get him to sign something. Legal document saying he surrenders all claims to the children before you tell him they exist. Get it in writing, witnessed and sealed, and only then would I open my mouth. He'd never sign something like that without knowing why. Then you've got a problem, don't you? Because if you tell him first, you're gambling everything on his sense of honor. And honey, honor is all well and good until it bumps up against pride or duty or political necessity. The brutal honesty was what Elara had always valued about Martha. But right now she wished the older woman would lie, would tell her everything would work out fine, would offer comfort instead of cold assessment. I can't get a legal document drawn up in 3 days, Elara said. And even if I could, he'd know I was trying to trap him into something. It would start everything off with deception and manipulation, exactly what his father-in-law did to him. You're not your father. No, and I won't act like him. Martha sighed, picked up the bucket again. You're going to trust him. I'm going to give him the choice my father never gave us. The chance to make a decision with all the information instead of half-truths and blackmail. That's real noble. Also real stupid. Probably. They walked the rest of the way to the well in silence. Elara filled her buckets, hoisted them, and started back toward the cottage. Behind her, Martha called out, For what it's worth, I hope you're right about him. Those kids deserve better than being fought over like property. The words stayed with Elara through the rest of the day, through teaching lessons to distracted students who sensed something wrong in their teacher's demeanor, through preparing dinner while Rowan and Lelia played outside in the lengthening shadows. That night, after the children were asleep, she did something she hadn't done in years. She pulled out the small wooden box she'd brought from her old life, the one containing the few items she hadn't been able to leave behind. A jade bracelet from her mother, dead these past 10 years. A book of poetry given to her by a governess who'd actually cared whether Elara learned anything. And a handkerchief embroidered with Adrian's initials, stolen from his coat pocket one night when she'd been young and foolish enough to think such tokens mattered. She held the handkerchief up to the lamplight, tracing the careful stitching. Some servant had done this work, had spent hours creating something beautiful for a man who probably hadn't even noticed it existed before Elara took it. Had he noticed she was gone? Really noticed, the way you'd notice losing a piece of yourself? The letter said yes. But letters could lie, or at minimum, reshape truth into more palatable forms. She returned the handkerchief to the box and locked it away again. Sentiment wouldn't help her now. She needed to think clearly, plan carefully, and above all protect her children from becoming collateral damage in whatever reckoning was coming. The second day passed in a blur of nervous energy. She threw herself into work, scrubbed floors that didn't need scrubbing, reorganized the small schoolroom, helped Martha inventory supplies with the kind of focused intensity that made the innkeeper watch her with concerned eyes. You're going to wear yourself out before he even gets here, Martha observed. Good. Maybe I'll be too tired to care. You'll care. Question is whether you'll have any strength left to deal with it. Elara didn't answer. Couldn't, really, because Martha was right. On the third day, Callum returned. He came to the cottage directly this time, no pretense of discretion. Elara saw him through the window and her stomach clenched, but she opened the door before he could knock. Is he here? Tomorrow morning. Callum looked tired, like he'd been riding hard. He's staying overnight in Millbrook. I rode ahead to... He stopped, eyes moving past her to where Rowan had appeared in the doorway behind her. The boy stared at Callum with undisguised curiosity. Mama, who's this? A visitor, Elara said quickly. Go find your sister. Time for afternoon lessons. Rowan didn't move. He has a fancy horse. Rowan, now. Something in her voice made him obey, though he shot one last look at Callum before disappearing into the cottage. Callum's face had gone carefully blank, But Elara saw the calculations happening behind his eyes. Dark hair, right age. The way the boy stood, straight-backed, chin up, reminded her painfully of Adrian at formal dinners. "Inside," she said quietly. "We need to talk." They sat at her small table, and Elara made tea she didn't drink while Callum studied the cottage, with the kind of polite attention that meant he was buying time to organize his thoughts. "Those are his children," he said finally. "Yes." "Does he know?" "Not yet." "Elara, I'm going to tell him." She cut him off. "Tomorrow, when he arrives. But I need you to understand something first. Those children are mine. I raised them alone, fed them, taught them, kept them safe. They have a life here, friends, stability. I won't have that destroyed because their father suddenly developed a conscience." Callum leaned back in his chair. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to be there when I tell him, as a witness or a buffer, or I don't know. I just know I can't do this completely alone." "You're afraid of him." "I'm afraid of what he represents, the power to take everything I've built and call it justice. Adrian's not like that. You're his brother, you're biased, and you're terrified." Callum's voice gentled, "which tells me you still care what he thinks. If you truly hated him, you wouldn't be this scared." The observation hit too close. Elara stood, walked to the window where she could see Rowan and Lilia playing near the garden. They'd made a game of collecting stones, sorting them by color into careful piles. Lilia was lecturing her brother about classification systems with the supreme confidence of a child who'd just learned a new concept. "I don't hate him," she admitted. "That's the problem. It would be easier if I did. Love usually is harder than hate." "I don't love him either. I don't know what I feel except terrified and angry and so damn tired of carrying this alone." Behind her, she heard Callum stand. "Tomorrow morning, then. I'll be here at dawn. We'll ride out to meet him together. Tell him before he reaches the village." "Why would we do that?" "Because if you tell him here, where the children might overhear, where half the village can watch the Duke's reaction, it becomes public before anyone's ready. Out there," he gestured toward the hills, "out there he can break down if he needs to. He can rage or weep or whatever he has to do without an audience." It made sense. More sense than Elara's half-formed plan to simply wait at the cottage and drop the revelation on Adrian like a bomb. "All right," she said. "Dawn." Callum left, and Elara called the children inside. They ate supper, or rather, Rowan and Lilia ate, while Elara pushed food around her plate and tried to answer their questions about the fancy visitor without revealing anything important. "Is he a prince?" Lilia asked. "No, love." "A knight?" "No." "A tax collector?" Rowan's face showed deep suspicion. Despite everything, Elara almost smiled. "No, just someone I used to know, a long time ago." "Before you came here?" Lilia's eyes widened. "From when you lived in the big city?" Elara had told them fragments of her past, carefully edited, nothing about their father or her family's betrayal. Just that she'd once lived somewhere different, somewhere that hadn't fit her anymore. "Yes," she said. "From before." "Are we going to have to leave?" Rowan asked suddenly, and the fear in his voice made Elara's chest ache. "No, sweetheart. We're not leaving." "Promise?" She shouldn't promise. Couldn't really, when tomorrow might upend everything. But she looked at her son's worried face and heard herself say, "I promise we'll stay together. No matter what happens, we stay together." It was the only promise she could make, and mean it. That night, sleep was impossible. Elara lay in bed listening to the cottage settle, to Rowan's quiet breathing from the next room, to wine moving through the eaves. She tried to imagine tomorrow, what she'd say, how Adrian would react, what would happen after. Every scenario she constructed felt wrong, felt too simple, or too catastrophic, or too much like wishful thinking. Around 3 a.m, she gave up and went to sit by the kitchen stove, wrapped in a blanket, watching darkness slowly give way to gray. This was it. The moment she'd been running from for 7 years, catching up to her whether she was ready or not. Callum arrived exactly at dawn, leading a second horse. "Martha's agreed to watch the children," he said. "I told her you'd be back before noon." Elara pulled on her warmest coat and followed him outside. The village was just waking up, smoke from chimneys, a rooster crowing, someone's dog barking at shadows. Normal morning sounds that felt surreal against what she was about to do. They rode in silence, heading south along the main road. The sun was fully up when Callum finally spoke. For what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice. You don't know what I'm choosing. You're choosing honesty over safety. That's always the right choice, even when it costs you. Easy to say when they're not your children at risk. Fair enough. They crested a hill and Callum held up a hand. There. In the distance, a rider approached. Even from here, even after 7 years, Elara recognized the way he sat his horse, the straight back, the controlled grace that came from a lifetime of training. Adrian Thorne, Duke of Greymont, riding toward the biggest revelation of his life without knowing it. Her heart hammered so hard she thought she might be sick. You don't have to do this, Callum said quietly. We could still turn back. No. Elara straightened in her saddle. We couldn't. Adrian saw them and reined in his horse, waiting as they approached. As they got closer, Elara could make out details. New lines around his eyes, gray threading through his dark hair at the temples, a hardness to his jaw that hadn't been there before. He looked older. Looked like a man who'd learned that life didn't care about intentions or promises. He looked, she realized with a jolt, like she felt. Elara. Her name came out rough, like he'd been practicing it and still couldn't get it right. Adrian. They stared at each other across 15 feet of dirt road and 7 years of silence. Callum cleared his throat. I'll wait over there. He pointed to a cluster of trees. Give you two some privacy. He rode off before either of them could respond. Adrian dismounted, then seemed to reconsider whether that was appropriate. Elara stayed on her horse, needing the height advantage, needing something between them besides air and history. You got my letter, Adrian said. Yes. And you didn't run. I thought about it. A ghost of something, maybe humor, maybe pain, crossed his face. I'm glad you didn't. Don't be. Not yet. Elara forced herself to meet his eyes. We need to talk, really talk. And what I have to tell you is going to change everything. Elara, I know I hurt you. I know my letter can't undo 7 years of... I have children. The words came out sharper than she'd intended, cutting across his apology. Twins. A boy and a girl. They're 6 years old. She watched understanding move through him like a wave. Saw the exact moment he did the math. Saw his face go white. Saw his hands grip the reins so tight, his knuckles showed bone white. They're mine, he said. Not a question. Yes. You were pregnant when you left. You were... He stopped, started again. Why didn't you tell me? Because I thought you'd chosen my sister over me. Because I thought you'd betrayed every promise you made. Because I was 23 and terrified, and I couldn't face the humiliation of begging for scraps of support from a man who'd married someone else. Adrian turned away, walked a few paces down the road, came back. Their names. Rowan and Lelia. Rowan and Lelia, he repeated, like he was testing how they felt in his mouth. Are they healthy? Happy? Yes. Do they know about me? They know they have a father who doesn't know they exist. They don't know who you are. He absorbed this in silence. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. I want to meet them. That's not your decision alone. The hell it isn't. They're my children. They're my children, Elara cut him off. I raised them. I fed them when we didn't have money for food. I taught them to read, kept them warm through winters that could kill, protected them from every hard thing this world could throw at us. You have biology. I have everything else. You kept them from me. You married my sister. The words hung between them, raw and bleeding. Adrian's face twisted. I was blackmailed. I explained that in the letter. Your father... I know what my father did. I also know you made a choice. Duty over love. Responsibility over promises. I'm not saying it was wrong. I'm saying you made it, and I made mine, and now we both have to live with the consequences. The consequence being I missed 6 years of their lives. Yes. Adrian walked to his horse, leaned against it like he needed the support. For a long moment, he just breathed. When he turned back, something in his face had changed. The anger was still there, but underneath it, she saw grief. Raw, unguarded grief. Please, he said quietly. Please let me meet them. The please broke something in her, She'd expected demands, legal threats, aristocratic outrage. Instead, he was asking, actually asking, like he knew he had no right to demand anything. Not yet, she said. You just found out they exist. I've had 6 years to figure out how to be their mother. Give yourself time to absorb this, to decide what you really want. I know what I want. Do you? Because I need more than biology here, Adrian. I need to know you won't see them as obligations or embarrassments. I need to know you won't try to take them from me to raise them properly, in some estate where they'll learn to be ashamed of where they came from. Her voice cracked. I need to know you won't destroy what we've built just because you have the power to do it. I would never. You don't know what you'd do. Neither do I. So we're going to take this slowly, carefully, and if at any point I think you're going to hurt them, I will disappear so completely you'll never find us again. Duke or not, money or not, I will protect my children. From anyone, including you. The threat should have made him angry. Instead, he nodded slowly. All right, slow, careful, whatever you need. I need you to go back to Millbrook tonight. Tomorrow you can come to the village. I'll introduce you as an old friend. The children can meet you without knowing who you really are yet. We'll see how it goes. And if it goes well, then we take the next step. One step at a time until we figure out what this looks like. Adrian studied her face. You've changed. Had to. The girl you knew died the day you married my sister. What's left is someone different. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Maybe not. Callum chose that moment to ride back over. Everything settled? For now, Elara said. She looked at Adrian one more time. Tomorrow, mid-morning, I'll meet you at the oak grove east of the village and bring you in from there. I'll be there? She turned her horse and rode away without looking back. Only when she was sure she was out of sight did she let herself shake, let the tears come, let the weight of what she'd just done crash over her like a wave. She'd opened the door. Now she had to figure out how to control what came through it. The letter trembled in her hands. Not from the wind, the grove had gone still, as if the world itself was holding its breath, but from the earthquake happening inside her chest. Elara. If you're reading this, then Callum found you. I don't know if that's fortune or cruelty, both, perhaps. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything except that you'll read these words before you decide whether to disappear again. That's all I'm asking. Just read them. Your father came to me 3 days before I planned to ask for your hand. He brought documents, ledgers, letters, proof of investments I'd made that violated about a dozen commercial regulations. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to create scandal. Enough to damage the duchy's standing, possibly trigger parliamentary investigations. He said if I married you, he'd release everything to the newspapers. If I married Isadora instead, the documents would disappear. I told him to go to hell. Then he played his second card. He said you'd been seen with Lord Ashford, multiple times, in compromising circumstances. He had witnesses prepared to testify, photographs that could be interpreted poorly. He said if I didn't agree, he'd make sure you were destroyed socially, completely ruined. No marriage prospects, no decent society, nothing. I still said no. The third thing he told me was that you were sick, that you'd contracted something during your travels to the continent, something the doctors weren't sure you'd survive, that the stress of a scandal would kill you, that the kindest thing I could do was let you recover in peace, marry Isadora to protect your reputation, and never speak of this to anyone. I was a coward, Elara. I believed him. Or I let myself believe him because it was easier than fighting. I married your sister thinking I was protecting you. When you disappeared, when your father said you'd run away with someone else, I thought, it doesn't matter what I thought. I was wrong. About everything. Adrian Elara read it twice, 3 times. The words didn't change. She folded the letter carefully, slipped it into her pocket, and walked back toward the village. Her legs moved automatically, carrying her through familiar streets while her mind spun in directions she couldn't control. Her father had orchestrated everything, had manipulated them both with surgical precision, using their feelings for each other as weapons. And she'd spent 7 years hating Adrian for a betrayal he'd never committed. The cottage appeared ahead. Through the window, she could see Lilia helping set the table for dinner, while Rowan built something elaborate with the wooden blocks Martha had carved for their last birthday. Normal, safe, the life she'd built from absolute nothing, a life that was about to shatter. She pushed open the door, and both children looked up with identical smiles that punched straight through her composure. "Mama!" Lilia abandoned the table and ran over. "Rowan made a castle with 17 towers. 17! That's more than last time." 16, Rowan corrected without looking up. "You can't count." "Can too." "Cannot." "Enough." Elara's voice came out sharper than she'd intended, and both children froze. She took a breath, softened her tone. "Sorry, it's been a long day. Wash up for dinner." They obeyed, but Rowan shot her a look that was far too perceptive for a 6-year-old. He had Adrian's eyes, she realized. Not just the color, but the way they saw straight through pretense to whatever truth lay underneath. Dinner was quiet. Elara pushed food around her plate and answered the children's questions with half her attention. The other half was 3 miles away, in the inn where Callum was staying, wondering what other revelations he might drop if she gave him the chance. After the twins were asleep, she walked back to the inn, found Callum in the small private room Martha sometimes rented to travelers who could afford it. He looked up from a stack of papers when she entered, surprise flickering across his face. "I read the letter," she said without preamble. "And?" "And I want to know everything, not Adrian's sanitized version, everything that happened after I left." Callum set down his pen. "That might take a while." "I have time." He poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a bottle on the side table, pushed one toward her. She didn't drink it immediately, just held the glass and waited. "Adrian went looking for you the day after the wedding," Callum began. "Tore through your family's estate like a madman. Your father told him you'd eloped with a French diplomat named Laurent Dubois. Had paperwork, travel documents, everything. Even a witness who claimed to have seen you boarding a ship at Dover. All fabricated. Obviously, but convincing. Adrian hired investigators anyway. Spent 6 months chasing ghosts across Europe before he finally accepted that you didn't want to be found." Callum paused. It broke something in him. He went through the motions, managed the duchy, attended parliament, played the dutiful husband, but anyone who knew him could see the difference. Elara took a sip of whiskey. It burned. He had a child with Isadora. Clara, she's 6 now. Callum's expression softened. "She looks like your sister, acts like her too, gentle, quiet, more interested in books than people. Adrian loves her, but she's not mine." The words hung between them, ugly and true. "Isadora knew," Callum said quietly. "About you and Adrian, I mean. She told me once, about a year after the wedding. Said your father had promised her that Adrian would forget you eventually, that she'd make him happy enough that it wouldn't matter." "Did she?" "I don't think Adrian let himself be happy. Not really. He did his duty, took care of Isadora, provided for Clara, managed his responsibilities. But there was always this distance, like he was performing a role rather than living a life." Elara drained her glass. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve to know. Because Adrian deserves a chance to explain himself. Because—" Callum stopped, started again. "Because in 4 days he's going to show up here and you're going to have to decide whether 7 years of anger is worth more than the truth." "I have children, Callum. His children. That changes everything." "Does it? Or does it just make the decision harder?" She wanted to throw the glass at him, wanted to scream that yes, of course it made everything harder, that she'd built an entire life around protecting Rowan and Lilia from exactly this kind of complication. Instead, she stood up. "I need to think." "Elara, wait." Callum rose too. "There's something else, something I found in your father's papers after he died." Her father was dead. She absorbed that information with the same numbness she'd felt about Isadora. Another ghost from a life she'd left behind. "What papers?" Callum pulled a folder from his stack, handed it to her. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to her in Adrian's handwriting, all unopened. "He sent these over the course of 2 years, Callum explained. Your father intercepted every single one. I found them in his study, locked in a drawer with instructions that they be burned upon his death. His executor ignored those instructions and sent them to me instead." Elara's hands shook as she rifled through the letters. Some were thick, multiple pages. Others just a single sheet. All sealed with Adrian's crest, all returned unopened. "You can read them if you want," Callum offered. "Or burn them. Or throw them in the river. But I thought you should know they existed." She clutched the folder to her chest. "Did Adrian know? That they were never delivered?" "Not until after your father died. He thought Callum's voice went rough. He thought you'd read every word and chosen silence as your answer. The injustice of it crashed over her. 7 years of silence built on lies and interception and manipulation. 7 years of raising her children alone while their father mourned a woman who'd never stopped existing, just stopped being reachable. "I need to go," she said. Callum didn't try to stop her this time. Back at the cottage, Elara lit the fire and spread the letters across the table in chronological order. 2 years' worth of correspondence. 2 years of words Adrian had written, believing she'd rejected them. She started with the first one. "Elara, I know you're angry. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but please, just tell me you're safe. Tell me you're alive and well, and I'll stop writing. I'll leave you in peace, but I need to know you're alive. Adrian." The second, dated 2 weeks later. "Elara, your father says you're happy. I hope that's true. I hope wherever you are, whoever you're with, brings you the joy I couldn't. I'm sorry for everything, for believing him, for not fighting harder, for being too much of a coward to risk everything for the one thing that mattered. Adrian." They progressed like that, desperate at first, then resigned, then distant. The final letter, dated nearly 2 years after she'd left, was just 3 lines. "Elara, this is the last time I'll write. I hope you find whatever peace I couldn't give you. Adrian." She read them all, every word, every crossed-out phrase, every postscript. By the time she finished, dawn was breaking and her face was wet with tears she didn't remember starting. The enormity of what had been stolen from them, from her, from Adrian, from their children, was almost too large to comprehend. Her father had taken their future and twisted it into something unrecognizable, and neither of them had known enough to fight back. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Martha stood in the doorway, taking in the scattered letters and Elara's ravaged face with a single sweeping glance. "Callum told me," Martha said. "The Duke's coming." "I know. What are you going to do?" "I don't know." Martha crossed the room, started gathering the letters into a neat stack. "You've got 3 options, as I see it. Run again. Take the children somewhere even more remote. Stay and face him. Deal with whatever comes. Or," she paused, "or you go to him first. Take control of the situation instead of waiting for it to control you." "Go to him?" "To the estate. It's 3 days' hard ride south. You could be there and back before he ever makes it here." Martha's eyes were sharp. "Might be smart, seeing as how you'd be on your territory when you return. And you'd have answers before he shows up asking questions about those twins of yours." It was reckless, possibly insane, and exactly the kind of direct action that Elara had built her survival on. "The children, I'll watch them. They'll be safe here." Martha's expression softened fractionally. "Go figure out what you need to figure out. Come back when you're ready." Elara looked at the letters, at the proof of manipulation and lost years, at the evidence that the man she'd hated for 7 years had been hating himself just as thoroughly. "I need to know," she said quietly. "I need to see his face when I tell him about Rowan and Lilia. Need to know if he's the man who wrote these letters or the man my father described. I can't make any decisions until I know that." "Then go find out." The estate loomed against the sky like something from a nightmare, all gray stone and sharp angles. Elara had been here once before, years ago, for a garden party her mother had insisted on attending. It had seemed impressive then, old money and older power made physical. Now it just looked like a prison. She'd ridden for 3 days straight, stopping only when the horse needed rest. Her body ached, her hands were blistered from the reins, and she probably looked like something that had crawled out of a ditch. Perfect. The main entrance was too obvious. She circled around to the servants' quarters, found a young maid hauling water from the well. "I need to get inside," Elara said without preamble. The maid's eyes went wide. "I can't just—" Elara pulled out the last of her money. "Please, it's important." The girl looked at the coins, at Elara's desperate face, and made a decision. Servants' entrance. 3rd door on the left leads to the back stairs. The Duke's study is 2nd floor, east wing, but he's got meetings until late, so thank you. Elara slipped inside before the girl could reconsider. The back stairs were exactly where promised, narrow and dim and clearly not meant for anyone important. She climbed them carefully, ears straining for footsteps or voices. The study door was unlocked. Stupid, really. But then, who would break into a duke's private study? She pushed it open and stepped inside. Papers everywhere, books stacked on every available surface. A chess set frozen mid-game on a side table. The room looked like someone worked here rather than just inhabited it, which was somehow worse. Harder to hate when faced with evidence of humanity. She moved to the desk, started rifling through papers. Most of it was duchy business, mining reports, tax assessments, correspondence with Parliament, nothing personal, nothing that would... Her hand froze on a drawer. It was locked, but poorly. The kind of lock that was more about privacy than security. She pulled a hairpin from her tangled braid and worked the mechanism until it clicked open. Inside was a single leather journal. Elara pulled it out, flipped it open to a random page. Adrian's handwriting, smaller and more cramped than in his letters. Can't stop thinking about what Callum said. That I should try to move forward, build something with what I have rather than mourning what I lost. But how do you move forward when every decision you make is built on the foundation of the worst mistake of your life? Clara asked about her mother today, wanted to know if Isadora loved her. I said yes, of course, because what else do you tell a child? But the truth is, I don't know. Isadora loved the idea of being a duchess, loved the status and the security and the respectability. Whether she loved Clara or me or anything beyond what we represented, I'm being unfair. She didn't deserve my resentment. She didn't ask for this marriage any more than I did. We were both just pawns in her father's game. Sometimes I dream that Elara is still alive, that she's somewhere safe, building a life that makes her happy. I hope that's true. I hope she found whatever I couldn't give her. Elara's throat closed. She flipped backward, reading entries at random. Burned the last of her letters today. The ones I never sent. Seemed pointless to keep them. She made her choice. I made mine. We both have to live with the consequences. Clara drew a picture of our family, just the two of us. When I asked why she didn't include anyone else, she said, "Because we don't need anyone else, Papa." Nearly broke my heart. A child shouldn't grow up thinking isolation is normal. Callum found something, won't tell me what yet, but his face when he mentioned Elara's name, that was the last entry, dated 4 days ago. Elara closed the journal, hands shaking. This was wrong. Invasion of privacy, theft, everything she'd raised her children not to do. But she couldn't stop reading, couldn't stop searching for the truth in these private words never meant for her eyes. A sound in the hallway froze her. Footsteps, getting closer. She shoved the journal back in the drawer, locked it as quickly as her fumbling fingers would allow. Looked around for somewhere to hide, but the room was too open, too sparse. The door opened. Adrian Thorne stood in the doorway, still in riding clothes, dust on his boots, and exhaustion carved into every line of his face. He looked older than the journal entries, older than the wedding day, older than her memory. But his eyes, those were the same, dark and sharp, and currently widening in absolute shock. Elara? Her name on his lips after 7 years hit like a physical blow. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. He closed the door behind him slowly, like she was a wild animal that might bolt. You're here. You're actually here. I needed to know, she managed. Before you came to Cross Hill, I needed... How did you even... He stopped, shook his head. Callum, of course. Did he tell you everything? He told me enough. Adrian moved closer, and Elara's instinct was to retreat, but she forced herself to hold her ground. He stopped an arm's length away, close enough that she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the gray threading through his dark hair. I looked for you, he said. For 6 months, I searched everywhere, spent a fortune on investigators, followed every lead no matter how ridiculous. Your father said, my father was a liar. I know that now, I know. His voice cracked. I know I should have tried harder, should have questioned his story, pushed back when something felt wrong. But I was grieving, and I let myself believe what was easiest. That I'd betrayed you. Yes. The honesty of it cut deeper than any accusation. Elara wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold something together that wanted to fragment. I have children, she said abruptly. Adrian went still. What? Twins. A boy and a girl. They're 6 years old. She met his eyes directly. They're yours. The color drained from his face. He reached out like he needed support, found the edge of the desk, gripped it hard enough his knuckles went white. Mine, he repeated. Yes. You were pregnant when you left. Yes. And you didn't tell me. Something in his tone sparked anger through her shock. Tell you? I watched you marry my sister. I stood there and watched you put a ring on her finger, and you expect... I didn't know. The words exploded out of him. I didn't know about the pregnancy, didn't know your father had lied, didn't know you thought I'd betrayed you. I would have... He stopped, visibly trying to control himself. What are their names? The question derailed her anger. What? My children. What are their names? Rowan and Lilia. He repeated them softly, like memorizing. Are they safe? Are they well? They're perfect. The word came out fierce, protective. They're smart and stubborn, and they don't need a father. His laugh was bitter. No, I imagine they don't. Not after 6 years without one. He looked at her, and there was something raw in his expression. Can I see them? No. Elara? No? She stepped back. I didn't come here to arrange visitation. I came here because I needed to know if the man who wrote those letters was real or if it was just another lie. I needed... She stopped. Because what had she needed? Closure? Confirmation? Some sign that the last 7 years hadn't been completely wasted on hating someone who'd been as much a victim as she was? What did you need? Adrian asked quietly. The truth came out before she could stop it. I needed to know if I could forgive you. The silence stretched between them. Outside, a bird sang. Somewhere in the house, a door closed. And? He finally asked. Can you? Elara looked at him. Really looked. At the man who'd loved her enough to write 2 years' worth of unanswered letters. The man who'd mourned her while married to someone else. The man who'd just learned he was a father, and his first question had been about his children's safety rather than his rights. I don't know, she admitted. I don't know if forgiveness is even the right word for what I feel. Then what do you feel? Angry, sad, cheated, like 7 years of my life were stolen by someone we both trusted. She swallowed hard, but also relieved, because I spent all these years thinking you'd chosen status over me, and knowing you didn't, knowing you tried, that changes something. I don't know what yet, but something. Adrian nodded slowly. I'm still coming to Cross Hill. I need to see them. Even if it's from a distance, even if they don't know who I am, I need to see my children. They look like you, she said. Rowan especially. He has your eyes. Elara, I should go. She moved toward the door, then stopped, turned back. The journal. In your desk. I read it. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have, but I needed... I know. I could tell the drawer had been opened. He smiled, and it was sad and knowing. Did you find what you were looking for? No. Yes. I don't know. She reached for the door handle. 3 days. That's when I'll expect you in Cross Hill. Come alone. Not with an entourage or guards or any display of power. Just you. Agreed. She pulled the door open, then paused one more time. Adrian, why didn't you burn them? The letters you never sent. Because they were the only thing I had left of who we used to be. Even if you'd never read them, even if they'd never mattered to anyone but me, they were proof that it had been real. What we felt. He held her gaze. That matters. Even when everything else is broken, that matters. Elara left without answering, walked down the back stairs, through the servants' entrance to where her exhausted horse waited. She mounted up and rode north without looking back. But his words followed her like ghosts. That matters. The ride back took longer. The horse was tired, she was tired, and her mind kept circling the same impossible question. What now? She had answers, had proof that Adrian hadn't betrayed her, that her father had orchestrated everything, that the last 7 years had been built on manufactured lies. But having answers didn't solve the practical reality of her situation. She had children who'd grown up without a father, a life she'd built through sheer stubborn will, a place in Cross Hill that had nothing to do with titles or status or the world she'd left behind. And now Adrian knew about Rowan and Lilia, which meant nothing would ever be simple again. Martha was waiting when she returned, taking one look at Elara's face and putting the kettle on without comment. How are they? Elara asked. Fine. Drove me half mad asking when you'd be back, but fine. They're at the Brennan farm right now, helping with the spring planting. Martha poured tea, pushed a cup across the table. You look like you've been through hell. I saw him. And? And I don't know what I am anymore. Elara wrapped her hands around the warm cup. Everything I believed for 7 years was wrong. My father lied. Adrian searched for me. None of it happened the way I thought it did. Does that change how you feel? It changes everything. It changes nothing. I don't... She stopped, frustrated. I built my life on the foundation of that betrayal. Raised my children to be strong because I thought they'd never have anyone but me. And now I find out their father wanted them, wanted me, but never knew we existed? Martha sipped her tea. Seems to me you're asking the wrong question. What's the right one? Not what happened before. That's done. Can't change it. Martha's eyes were steady. Question is what happens next. What you want now that you know the truth. What did she want? Elara examined the question from all angles, and the answer that emerged surprised her. I want him to meet them, she said slowly, not as the Duke swooping in to claim his heirs. As their father, if he can manage it. As someone who earns their trust instead of demanding it. That's fair, but I want it on my terms. In Cross Hill, where I have control. Where they're safe. Also fair. And I want... Elara stopped. The next part was harder to admit. I want to know if what we had was real, not just memory and longing and what might have been. I want to know if the person I loved 7 years ago still exists, or if we're both too changed for it to matter. Martha nodded thoughtfully. Then I'd say you've got a plan. Not a perfect one, but whose plan ever is? The next 3 days passed in a strange, suspended state. Elara told Rowan and Lelia that someone important was coming to visit. Someone from her past. Rowan asked if it was their father. Elara's breath had caught before she managed to say that, yes, it might be. Will he like us? Lilia had asked, and the uncertainty in her voice had nearly destroyed Elara's composure. He'll love you, she'd answered. How could he not? She prepared the cottage obsessively, cleaned things that didn't need cleaning, organized things that were already organized. Martha finally banned her from the kitchen after she reorganized the spice shelf for the 3rd time. On the evening of the 3rd day, a single rider crested the hill overlooking Cross Hill. Even from a distance, Elara recognized the set of his shoulders, the way he sat the horse. Adrian had come alone, as promised. She stood outside the cottage and watched him approach. He dismounted when he reached her, and for a long moment they just looked at each other. They're inside? He asked. Yes. But Adrian, she caught his arm. They don't know. Not really. I told them you might be their father, but they don't understand what that means. They're 6. They've never had a father before. I know. If you hurt them, if you make promises you can't keep or treat them like obligations, I will make you regret ever finding us. Duke or not, power or not, I will destroy you. Do you understand? His expression was grave. I understand. And if you're here because you think you have some right to them, some ownership because of biology, I'm here, Adrian interrupted gently, because they're my children and I've already missed 6 years of their lives. I'm here because I want to know them, if they'll let me, not as possessions or heirs or anything except themselves. He paused. I'm here because I never stopped loving their mother, and I need to find out if there's any chance... He stopped, shook his head. That's not fair. Not after everything. Elara's heart hammered. What's not fair? Asking you to trust me again. Asking for something I have no right to ask for. Ask anyway. He met her eyes. Is there any chance you could forgive me? Not now, not today, but someday? Because I know I should just be grateful to meet my children, should accept whatever scraps you're willing to give, but I can't. I can't be this close to you and not hope that maybe... The cottage door banged open, cutting him off. Rowan and Lelia tumbled out, alerted by the sound of voices. They stopped when they saw Adrian, stared at him with wide, curious eyes. Adrian stared back and Elara watched his face transform. She saw the exact moment he recognized himself in their features. Rowan's dark hair and direct gaze, Lilia's sharp cheekbones, and the stubborn set of her jaw. Saw him struggle to breathe, to maintain any kind of composure. Hello, he managed. Are you our papa? Lilia asked with characteristic bluntness. Adrian's eyes flicked to Elara. She nodded infinitesimally. Yes, he said. I am. Rowan stepped forward, examining Adrian with the intensity of a battlefield general. Where have you been? The question was simple. The answer was anything but. Adrian knelt in the dirt so he was eye level with them. That's a complicated story, but the short version is that I didn't know you existed. If I had known, I would have been here from the beginning. Why didn't Mama tell you? Lilia asked. Because... Adrian's voice caught. Because some people lied to both of us, made us think things that weren't true. And by the time we figured out the truth, a lot of time had passed. Rowan processed this with a frown. That seems stupid. Despite everything, Elara felt a laugh bubble up. Adrian smiled, and it was real and warm and so familiar her chest ached. You're absolutely right, he agreed. It was very stupid. Are you staying? Lilia asked. The question hung in the air. Adrian looked up at Elara, and she saw the plea in his eyes. The desperation to say yes, to promise everything, to make up for 7 years in a single declaration. She also saw him swallow that impulse, saw him understand that this wasn't about what he wanted. That depends, Adrian said carefully, looking back at the children, on whether you want me to, and on your mother. I'm not here to take over or change things. I'm here to be whatever you need, if you need anything at all. We need a papa, Lilia said matter-of-factly. Everyone else has one. It's been just us and Mama forever. Lilia, Elara started, it's true. And now we have one, so he should stay. She looked at Adrian. Can you build things? Rowan wants to build a treehouse, but Mama says it's too dangerous. I can build things, Adrian confirmed, and Elara heard the laughter underneath the words. But if your mother says it's dangerous, she's probably right. She's always right, Rowan sighed. It's annoying. This time Elara did laugh. I'm standing right here. The children looked between their parents, and Elara saw wheels turning behind their eyes. Saw them calculating, adjusting, trying to fit this new piece into the puzzle of their world. Can we show them the village? Rowan asked. And the school? And the place where we found the fox den last month? Tomorrow, Elara said. Right now, you two need to wash up for dinner. They grumbled but obeyed, disappearing back into the cottage. When they were gone, silence fell between Elara and Adrian like a curtain. They're remarkable, Adrian said quietly. They're children. They don't understand the implications of any of this. Do you? Elara looked at him. Really looked, the way she hadn't let herself earlier. He looked tired, yes. Older. But there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch, something that remembered rose gardens and stolen kisses and promises made in the dark. No, she admitted, I have no idea what I'm doing. I just know that they deserve better than parents who hate each other. I could never hate you. Even though I kept them from you? You thought I'd betrayed you. You were protecting them. How could I hate that? He stepped closer. Elara, I know I have no right to ask for anything. I know 7 years is too long, the damage too deep, but if there's any chance... The cottage door opened again. Martha stood there, surveying the scene with sharp eyes. Dinner's ready, she announced. And there's enough for one more, if certain dukes haven't forgotten how to eat at a regular table. Adrian looked at Elara. She should send him away. Should maintain distance until they'd figured out what this meant. Should protect herself and her children from the chaos of reopened wounds. Instead, she nodded. Stay. Dinner was awkward and wonderful and terrible all at once. The twins peppered Adrian with questions. Where did he live? Did he have horses? Had he ever seen the ocean? What was his favorite food? And he answered each one with patience that bordered on reverence. Elara watched him interact with them and felt her carefully constructed walls cracking. This was the man she'd fallen in love with. Thoughtful, kind, genuinely interested in the people around him. But he was also a stranger, someone who'd lived an entire life she knew nothing about. After dinner, after the children were finally asleep, she and Adrian sat outside under a sky full of stars. What happens now? She asked. I don't know. What do you want to happen? I want... She stopped, started again. I want to know if we can build something real, not based on memory or obligation or guilt, but on who we actually are now. I want my children to have a father who's present and reliable, and I want... She couldn't finish. The wanting was too big, too terrifying. Adrian reached for her hand. She let him take it. I'll stay, he said. As long as you'll let me. I'll sleep in the inn, come here during the day, get to know them, get to know you again. He paused. I have responsibilities in the South. The duchy, Clara, obligations I can't just abandon, but I can split my time. Can bring Clara here sometimes if you're willing. Can make this work if you want to try. And if it doesn't work, if we realize we're too different now, then we figure out how to be good parents separately instead of together. His thumb traced circles on her palm. But I'd like to try, if you're willing. Elara looked at their joined hands. 7 years ago, she'd have said yes without thinking. Now she had children to consider, a life she'd fought for, stakes that went beyond just her heart. But she also had the truth, had the letters and the journal and the evidence that what they'd had was real enough to survive 7 years of lies. Okay, she said. We'll try. Something shifted in the darkness. Elara turned toward the sound and saw a figure emerge from the shadows, a messenger on horseback, riding hard despite the late hour. He pulled up sharply when he saw them. Duke Thorn? Adrian stood, and Elara heard his tone shift into something commanding. What is it? Message from the estate, Your Grace, marked urgent. He dismounted, pulled a sealed letter from his bag. Adrian broke the seal, read by the light spilling from the cottage window. Elara watched his expression change. Confusion, then shock, then something darker. What? She asked. He looked up at her and there was fear in his eyes. Real, visceral fear. It's your father's lawyer. He's filed a formal petition with the courts claiming custody of any illegitimate children I might have fathered. Claims they're entitled to protection under the duchy's care. Adrian's hand clenched on the paper. He's coming for Rowan and Lilia. Tomorrow. The words landed like stones in water, ripples spreading outward into everything Elara had built. She felt her lungs constrict, her vision narrow to just Adrian's face and the paper trembling in his hand. No. The word came out flat. No, they can't. That's not legal. They're my children. Legally, they're illegitimate heirs to a duchy. That puts them in a gray area the courts can exploit. Adrian's jaw tightened. Your father's lawyer, Marcus Hewitt, he's been circling since your father died, looking for angles. This is just his latest. The messenger shifted uncomfortably. Your Grace, there's more. Hewitt's also claiming that Miss Vance is unfit, that raising children in poverty without proper education or opportunities constitutes neglect. He's got witnesses prepared to testify. Elara's hands curled into fists. Witnesses to what? That my children can read better than most adults? That they're healthy and happy and loved? Witnesses who'll say whatever Hewitt pays them to say, Adrian said grimly. He turned to the messenger. How much time do we have? He's already left the capital, could be here by midday tomorrow, maybe sooner if he pushes hard. Then we push harder. Adrian looked at Elara. Pack what you need. We're leaving tonight. No, she stepped back. I'm not running again. I spent 7 years running from lies, and I won't do it anymore. Elara, if they take the children, they won't. Her voice came out harder than she'd intended. Because we're going to beat Hewitt at his own game. Adrian stared at her. How? I need to see those documents, the ones my father used to blackmail you. Her mind was racing now, pieces clicking into place. If Hewitt is working off my father's instructions, then those documents might still exist. And if they exist, they're leverage. Leverage for what? Proof that my father was a criminal. That any instructions left in his will are void because they came from illegal activity. She grabbed Adrian's arm. Where would he have kept them? The originals, not copies. Adrian thought for a moment. His estate. The study, probably. In the safe behind the portrait of your grandfather. Can you get us in? It's been sold. The new owner won't just... Can you get us in? Elara repeated. Something shifted in Adrian's expression. Recognition, maybe, of the woman she'd become. Not the society girl he'd known, but someone who'd learned to fight dirty when survival demanded it. Yes, he said. But we'll need to move fast. Martha appeared in the doorway, drawn by the raised voices. She took in the scene, the messenger, the papers, the tension crackling between Elara and Adrian, and her expression hardened. What's happening? Someone's trying to take the children, Elara said. We need to go, tonight. Can you watch them until we're back? How long? 2 days, maybe 3. Martha didn't hesitate. Go. I'll tell them you're helping someone in the next village. They won't question it. Elara looked toward the cottage, where her children slept unaware that their entire world was about to be threatened. Everything in her screamed to stay, to guard them physically, to build a wall between them and anything that might hurt them. But staying meant losing, and she was done losing. Keep them inside tomorrow, she told Martha. Don't let anyone see them. Don't let anyone ask questions. If Hewitt shows up, I'll handle it. Martha's eyes were steel. You just do what needs doing. They left within the hour. Adrian's horse was built for speed, and Elara had learned to ride hard during her years in the north. The messenger went ahead to arrange fresh mounts at coaching inns along the route, payment guaranteed by Adrian's seal. They didn't talk much during the ride. There wasn't breath for it, and besides, what was there to say? Every minute they spent traveling was a minute closer to Hewitt reaching Cross Hill. Every hour put them deeper into a gamble that might cost Elara everything. Dawn broke gray and cold as they approached the Vance estate. It looked different from Elara's memories, smaller somehow. The new owner had already made changes. New gates, fresh paint, gardens rearranged to someone else's taste. The family who bought it are in London for the season, Adrian said as they dismounted at the edge of the property. But there'll be servants, groundskeepers. We can't just walk in. Then we don't walk. Elara studied the building, mapping it against her memories. There's a servants' entrance on the east side. During my father's time, they never locked it properly. Too much traffic in and out. If they haven't changed the locks, that's a lot of ifs. You have a better plan? Adrian shook his head. They circled around, keeping to the tree line until they reached the east wall. The door was where Elara remembered, half hidden behind overgrown ivy. She tried the handle, locked. Damn. She pulled out the hairpin again, working the mechanism like she'd practiced on the study door. Her hands shook from exhaustion and adrenaline, making the delicate work nearly impossible. Adrian's hand covered hers, steadying it. Slow. You've got time. She didn't, but she slowed anyway. Felt the tumbler shift, catch, finally surrender. The door swung open. Inside was darkness and the smell of dust and old wood. Elara led the way through passages she'd known as a child, navigating by memory and the faint light filtering through shuttered windows. Once, a floorboard creaked and they both froze, waiting for shouts or footsteps. Nothing came. Nothing. The study was on the second floor, exactly where it had always been. The portrait of her grandfather still hung on the wall. Apparently the new owners had purchased the furnishings along with the house. Adrian moved to the painting, lifted it carefully off its hooks. Behind it, set into the wall, was the safe. Do you know the combination? Elara whispered. No. Do you? My father never told me anything important. She examined the lock. This isn't something I can pick. Adrian pulled a small leather case from his coat. Inside were tools Elara didn't recognize, thin metal implements that looked like surgical instruments. Where did you get those? Callum. He has varied interests. Adrian selected a tool, inserted it into the lock. This might take a while. We don't have a while. Then pray I get lucky. Elara kept watch at the door while Adrian worked. Minutes crawled past. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed 8. Servants would be starting their morning routines. Someone would notice the open door, the disturbed dust, the wrongness of their presence. Got it. The safe swung open with a soft click. Inside were papers, dozens of them, bundled and labeled in her father's precise handwriting. Adrian pulled them out, spreading them across the desk. These are the ones he used against me, Adrian said, pointing to one bundle. Banking records, investment documents, all technically legal but ethically questionable. And these, he grabbed another stack. These are correspondence, letters between your father and various business associates. Elara rifled through them, scanning for anything useful. Most were mundane, shipping schedules, property transactions, social invitations. Then she found a letter that made her breath catch. Hewitt, regarding our discussion of contingencies, should anything happen to me, I want assurance that certain matters remain managed. The situation with my daughters, particularly Elara's unfortunate departure, must be handled delicately. If she should resurface, or if any illegitimate issue should be discovered, I trust you'll take appropriate action to protect the family name. The documents enclosed should provide sufficient leverage. Use them as needed. The goal is not punishment, but containment. Make sure she understands that some choices have permanent consequences. Vance attached were copies of the same documents Adrian had just identified, plus additional ones, medical records that Elara recognized as fabricated, testimony from servants who'd been paid to lie, even a forged letter supposedly written by Elara confessing to an affair with multiple men. The sheer viciousness of it stole her breath. Her father had prepared this insurance policy knowing it might destroy her completely, had planned for the contingency of her survival like a general planning for enemy movements. Elara? Adrian touched her shoulder. What is it? She handed him the letter, watched his expression darken as he read. This proves it, she said. Proves that everything Hewitt's doing now is based on my father's illegal instructions. Proves the custody claim is part of a pattern of manipulation and blackmail. It proves your father was a bastard. I'm not sure that's enough to stop Hewitt legally. Then we don't stop him legally. Elara gathered the papers, shoving them into her bag. We stop him the way my father would have, with leverage and public pressure and making it more expensive to fight than to surrender. What are you thinking? I'm thinking we go back to Cross Hill. We let Hewitt show up, and when he does, we show him exactly what we found and give him a choice. Withdraw the petition quietly, or we release everything to the newspapers. She met Adrian's eyes. Your questionable banking practices, my father's blackmail scheme, the whole ugly story. It'll be a scandal that makes everyone look bad, but it'll also make his custody claim look like what it is, a continuation of criminal conspiracy. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. That would damage the duchy's reputation, could affect business relationships, political alliances, everything I've worked to build. I know. You're asking me to choose between my position and my children. I'm asking you to fight for them the way I've been fighting for 7 years. Her voice went hard. I'm asking you to decide what matters more, respectability or family. She expected him to hesitate, to calculate the costs, to find some compromise that protected everyone. Instead, he nodded once. All right, we do it your way. Footsteps sounded in the hallway outside. They both froze. Someone's here, Adrian whispered. We need to move. They shoved the remaining papers into the bag, left the safe open, no time to close it properly. Adrian grabbed Elara's hand and they ran, retracing their path through the silent house. Behind them, voices rose in alarm as someone discovered the open safe. They made it to the servants' entrance, burst out into gray morning light. Horses were where they'd left them. Adrian boosted Elara up, mounted his own horse in one fluid motion. There, stop them! A groundskeeper ran toward them, shouting. Adrian kicked his horse into a gallop, and Elara followed. They thundered down the drive, past the gates, onto the open road. No one pursued. Either the servants didn't care enough, or they recognized Adrian's crest and decided discretion was wiser. They rode hard until the estate disappeared behind them, then slowed to let the horses breathe. That was insane, Adrian said, and he was almost laughing. Breaking into a house in broad daylight, stealing documents. You brought lockpicks, Elara pointed out. You were planning for this. Maybe I was hoping you'd suggest something reckless. Maybe I wanted to see if you were still the woman who once climbed out a second-story window to avoid a boring dinner party. Despite everything, Elara smiled. I'm not that woman anymore. No. You're someone stronger, someone who'd break into her childhood home to protect her children. He looked at her with something like wonder. I don't know if I ever really knew you before. The real you, underneath the society masks. You knew enough to write 2 years of letters. Fair point. They made it back to Cross Hill by late afternoon, horses nearly dead from exhaustion. Martha met them at the cottage door, her expression grim. He's here. Arrived 2 hours ago with a magistrate and 3 guards. They're at the inn. Elara's stomach dropped. Did they come to the cottage? Not yet, but they've been asking questions, talking to villagers, offering money for information about you and the children. What did people tell them? Martha's smile was sharp. Not a damn thing. Turns out folks around here don't take kindly to outsiders trying to steal one of our own. The words hit Elara sideways. One of our own. 7 years ago, she'd arrived in Cross Hill as a desperate stranger. Now the village was protecting her. Where are Rowan and Lilia? She asked. Hidden at the Brennan farm. I told them it was a game. They think they're hiding from foxes. Martha's eyes were shrewd. You got what you needed? Maybe. Probably. Elara touched the bag slung over her shoulder. Enough to make Hewitt think twice, at least. Then I'd say it's time to stop hiding and start fighting. Adrian had been quiet, watching the exchange. Now he spoke. Elara's right. We can't just defend, we need to attack. Attack how? Martha asked. Elara thought fast. Hewitt's advantage is legal authority and social position, but his weakness is that he's working off my father's illegal instructions. If we expose that publicly, here in Cross Hill, where people know me and trust me, we change the narrative. It stops being Duke's lawyer rescues neglected children and starts being corrupt lawyer continues dead man's blackmail scheme. You want to put him on trial in the court of public opinion, Adrian said slowly, before he can get you into an actual court. Exactly. And I want witnesses, people who can testify that my children are healthy, happy, well-educated, that I'm not an unfit mother, but someone who's built a life here through honest work. Martha nodded. I can get witnesses. Half the village owes you for teaching their children. They'll speak up. We need it tonight, Elara said, before Hewitt can file official papers or remove the children by force. We need a public gathering where we can present evidence and let people decide what's true. The church hall, Martha suggested, can hold about 60 people, and Father Benedict owes me a favor. I can have everyone assembled by evening. Adrian looked between them. You're going to force a corrupt lawyer to back down through community pressure and scandalous revelations. Yes, that's either brilliant or completely insane. Probably both, Elara admitted, but it's what we've got. Word spread through Cross Hill like fire in dry grass. By sunset, the church hall was packed. Villagers, farmers, merchants, even some travelers who'd heard something interesting was happening. Elara stood at the front with Martha and Adrian, facing a sea of curious and concerned faces. Hewitt sat in the front row with his magistrate and guards, his expression radiating contempt. He was older than Elara expected, late 50s, with silver hair and the kind of expensive clothes that announced money and power. The magistrate beside him looked uncomfortable, like he was beginning to suspect he'd been brought here under false pretenses. Father Benedict called the gathering to order. We're here tonight because serious accusations have been made against one of our community members. Accusations that affect us all, since they question whether we've been harboring an unfit mother and neglected children. A murmur ran through the crowd. Hewitt stood. Thank you, Father. I represent the interests of the Vance estate and, by extension, the welfare of 2 illegitimate children currently in the custody of Miss Elara Vance. He gestured toward Elara dismissively. I have documentation proving that these children, heirs by blood to the Duke of Greymont, are living in poverty, receiving inadequate education, and being raised in circumstances that no child of noble lineage should endure. I'm here to remove them to appropriate care. Appropriate according to whom? The voice came from the back, Thomas Brennan, whose farm the children were currently hidden at. According to the law and basic standards of decency, Hewitt replied smoothly. Then let's talk about the law, Elara said. Every eye turned to her. And let's talk about decency. And let's talk about whose interests are really being served here. She pulled the documents from her bag, held them up. These papers were found in my father's safe. They prove that everything you're claiming, Mr. Hewitt, is based not on concern for my children, but on instructions left by a man who spent his life manipulating people for profit. A man who blackmailed a duke, destroyed his own daughter's happiness, and apparently planned from beyond the grave to continue controlling everyone around him. Hewitt's expression flickered. Those are private documents. Obtained illegally, I might add. Read them. Elara thrust the papers toward the magistrate. Read what my father wrote to Hewitt. Read the contingency plans, the blackmail schemes, the fabricated evidence. Then tell me who's really unfit here. The magistrate took the papers reluctantly. As he read, his face went pale. These are... He looked up at Hewitt. You told me this was a straightforward custody matter. You said the mother was destitute and the children neglected. They are... My children can read Latin, Elara interrupted. They know mathematics, history, natural philosophy. I teach school here, Mr. Hewitt. I've educated half the children in this village. Are they all neglected too? It's not about education. Then what is it about? Money? Because my children have food, shelter, and clothing. Love? Because they have that in abundance. Or is it about continuing my father's vendetta because I dared to escape his control? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Hewitt was losing them, and he knew it. The law is clear, he tried. Illegitimate children of noble blood require. The law is clear that criminal conspiracy voids any legal instructions, Adrian cut in. He'd been silent until now, letting Elara lead, but his voice carried the weight of authority that 7 years of ducal responsibility had built. And that's what this is. Conspiracy. My children are not commodities to be claimed or prizes to be won. They're people, and they have a mother who's sacrificed everything to give them a good life. Your Grace, with respect, your personal feelings are irrelevant, Adrian finished. What's relevant is that you came here on false pretenses, with forged evidence, continuing a pattern of illegal manipulation. What's relevant is that if you pursue this, I'll make sure every newspaper in the country knows about it. Your reputation, my duchy's questionable finances, the Vance family's corruption, all of it, public. The threat hung in the air. Hewitt's face went red. You damage your own standing to protect her? Yes. Adrian didn't hesitate. Without question. The magistrate stood. Mr. Hewitt, I need to speak with you. Outside. Now. They left, and the hall erupted in conversation. Martha gripped Elara's arm. You're shaking. I know. Elara's hands trembled so badly she could barely hold on to the remaining papers. If this doesn't work, it'll work. Look at them. Martha gestured to the crowd. They're on your side. It was true. Faces that had been curious were now supportive, even angry on her behalf. Mrs. Keller stood, her son clutched to her side. My boy couldn't write his name before Miss Elara started teaching him. Now he reads me stories every night. She glared at the door Hewitt had disappeared through. Anyone who says she's unfit doesn't know what they're talking about. Others chimed in with similar stories. The baker whose daughter now kept his accounts. The farrier whose son had learned engineering principles from Elara's lessons. The widow whose twins Elara had helped deliver when the midwife was snowed in. One by one, they stood as witnesses. Not to neglect, but to dedication. Not to poverty, but to resourcefulness. Not to an unfit mother, but to someone who'd given everything she had to people who needed it. Elara felt tears threaten and blinked them back. She'd known these people for 7 years, worked alongside them, lived as one of them. But she hadn't realized how deeply she'd become part of the community until they closed ranks around her like this. The door opened. The magistrate returned alone. Mr. Hewitt has withdrawn his petition, he announced. After reviewing the evidence and considering the circumstances, he's concluded that the children are adequately cared for and that legal intervention is unnecessary. Elara's knees buckled. Adrian caught her, held her steady. However, the magistrate continued, there is still the matter of the children's legitimacy. They are legally heirs to the duchy. That creates certain complications. Complications we'll handle privately, Adrian said firmly. As a family matter, not a legal one. The magistrate nodded. Very well, I'll file a report recommending no action. But, Your Grace, I'd suggest formalizing the situation sooner rather than later. Courts don't like ambiguity, especially where inheritance is concerned. Understood. The magistrate left. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. People swarmed around Elara, congratulating her, offering support, celebrating the victory. Through it all, she kept her eyes on Adrian. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read, pride maybe, or respect, or something deeper she was afraid to name. When the crowd finally dispersed and they stood alone in the church hall, Adrian spoke first. You were magnificent. I was terrified. You didn't show it. You stood there and faced down someone with money and power and legal authority, and you beat him through sheer force of will. He moved closer. That's who you are now, someone who fights. I learned from necessity. You learned because you're stronger than you ever gave yourself credit for. His hand came up to her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone the way it had 7 years ago in a different life. The woman I fell in love with was remarkable, but the woman you've become, Elara, you're extraordinary. She should step back, should maintain the distance she'd carefully constructed. Should remember that one victory didn't erase 7 years of pain or solve the fundamental problems still between them. Instead, she let herself lean into his touch. Adrian, I know it's too soon, too complicated, too much. But he didn't drop his hand. But I need you to know that I see you. Not who you were, not who I wanted you to be, but who you actually are. And The door burst open. Rowan and Lelia tumbled in, Martha trailing behind with an apologetic expression. They heard the cheering, she explained. Couldn't keep them away any longer. Mama! Lelia crashed into Elara, nearly knocking her over. Mrs. Brennan said there were bad men trying to take us, but you stopped them. Did you really? I had help, Elara said, pulling both children close. A lot of help. Rowan looked at Adrian with new assessment. You helped? I tried to. Good. Rowan's expression was serious. Mama needs help sometimes, even if she pretends she doesn't. Rowan, Elara started. It's true. You never ask for anything. You just do everything yourself and get tired. He crossed his arms. If he's our papa, he should help. Out of the mouths of 6-year-olds. Elara looked at Adrian and saw her own emotions reflected back. The terror of the last day, the relief of victory, the fragile hope that maybe, they could build something real from the wreckage of what had been. You're right, Adrian told Rowan. I should help. I want to help. If your mother will let me. Both children turned to Elara expectantly. Martha did too. Even Father Benedict, still tidying the hall, paused to listen. She was surrounded by people who'd become her family through choice and circumstance and shared survival. People who'd stood up for her when she needed it most. People who'd taught her that strength came not from isolation but from connection. And she realized she was tired of doing everything alone. All right, she said, you can help. Lilia cheered. Rowan nodded approvingly. And Adrian smiled, really smiled, the kind that reached his eyes and made him look 10 years younger. Where do we start? He asked. Tomorrow, Elara decided. Tonight, we rest. Tomorrow, we figure out what comes next. They walked back to the cottage through darkness cut by starlight. The children ran ahead, energy renewed by the excitement. Martha peeled off toward the inn with a knowing look. That left Elara and Adrian walking side by side in comfortable silence. The magistrate was right, Adrian said eventually. We need to formalize the situation. Rowan and Lilia's status are arrangement, whatever we decide that is. I know. I could acknowledge them publicly, make them legitimate heirs. It would solve the legal issues and create a dozen new problems, Elara pointed out. They're happy here. They don't need titles or expectations or the weight of inheritance. They just need to be children. What do you need? The question stopped her. What did she need? 7 years ago, she'd thought she needed security, status, a place in the world. Then she'd thought she needed independence, self-sufficiency, freedom from anyone's control. Now, I need to know my children are safe, and I need... She stopped, searching for words. I need to know that if we try this, if we let you into our lives fully, you won't disappear when it gets hard. I need reliability more than romance, presence more than promises. I can do that, Adrian said quietly. I want to do that. Even if it means dividing your time between here and the duchy, even if it means your daughter Clara has to share you with half-siblings she doesn't know, even if society talks and people judge and it's messy and complicated. Especially then. He stopped walking, turned to face her fully. Elara, I spent 7 years living a life that looked perfect from the outside and felt empty from the inside. I don't want perfect anymore. I want real, even if real is messy. She studied his face in the starlight, looking for doubt or hesitation, found only certainty. Okay, she said. Then we try. Really try. Not half-heartedly, not with one foot out the door. We try to build something that works for all of us. Me, you, Rowan, Lilia, Clara, all of us. Deal. He held out his hand. She took it. And this time, when their fingers interlaced, it felt less like reconciliation and more like beginning. Ahead, the cottage windows glowed with lamplight. Inside, she could hear the children arguing about something inconsequential and Martha moving around the kitchen. Normal sounds, safe sounds, the sounds of home. Adrian squeezed her hand. Thank you. For what? For giving me a chance I didn't earn, for being willing to forgive what probably shouldn't be forgiven, for... His voice caught. For surviving when I thought I'd lost you forever. You did lose me, Elara said honestly. The person I was is gone. But maybe that's all right. Maybe we both needed to become different people before we could find each other again. They stood there in the darkness, holding hands like uncertain teenagers, neither quite ready to go inside and face what came next. Finally, Lilia's voice rang out. "Mama, are you coming? We're hungry." Elara laughed, the sound surprising her with its genuine lightness. "We should—" "Yes." Adrian released her hand. "We should." But before she could move toward the cottage, he caught her face between his hands and kissed her. It was brief, chaste, nothing like the desperate passion of 7 years ago. But it was real, present, a promise of possibility rather than a ghost of the past. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright. "Tomorrow," he said. "We start tomorrow." "Tomorrow," she agreed. And for the first time in 7 years, Elara walked into her home not alone but with someone beside her, ready to face whatever came next together. Tomorrow came with rain. Elara woke to the sound of water hammering the cottage roof and the children's voices already animated in the main room. She'd fallen asleep in her clothes, too exhausted to do more than collapse onto the bed after Adrian had finally left for the inn near midnight. When she emerged, Rowan and Lilia were building something elaborate with blocks while Martha cooked breakfast. Adrian sat at the table, looking rumpled and out of place in the small space, nursing a cup of tea. "You're here early," Elara said. "Couldn't sleep. Figured I might as well make myself useful." He gestured to a stack of firewood by the door. "Split that for you. Hope that's all right." It was such a normal, domestic thing, splitting firewood, that Elara felt something shift in her chest. This was the Duke of Greymont, a man who commanded servants and managed thousands of acres, doing manual labor because he couldn't sleep and wanted to help. "Thank you," she managed. Breakfast was chaotic. Lilia spilled milk twice, Rowan argued about whether eggs came from chickens or chickens came from eggs, and Martha kept shooting significant looks at Adrian like she was evaluating his fitness for some unspoken purpose. Through it all, Adrian listened to the children with genuine attention, asked questions, laughed at Lilia's terrible jokes, helped Rowan sound out a difficult word in the book he was reading. Watching him, Elara felt the last of her protective walls beginning to crumble. After breakfast, Martha pulled her aside. "He's good with them." "I know. Question is whether he'll stay good with them when the novelty wears off, when it's just routine and exhaustion and all the unglamorous parts of parenting." "I know that too." Martha studied her face. "But you're hoping anyway. Is that stupid? Maybe. Or maybe it's human." Martha squeezed her shoulder. "Just don't lose yourself in the hoping. You've built something here that's yours. Don't give it up for anyone, even him." The warning settled in Elara's stomach like a stone. Because Martha was right, she'd spent 7 years building a life from nothing, and that life had value independent of Adrian's presence in it. The question was whether they could merge their lives without one consuming the other. Adrian left after breakfast to send messages south, to the duchy, to Callum, to the various people who needed to know his plans had changed. He returned in the afternoon with news. "I need to go back," he said, and Elara's heart sank before he continued. "But just for a week. There are things I have to handle in person, duchy business I can't delegate, and Clara. She deserves to know what's happening before she hears it from someone else." "Of course." Elara kept her voice neutral. "I want to bring her back with me. If you're willing, let her meet Rowan and Lilia, see Cross Hill, understand that she's not losing a father but gaining siblings." The thought of Adrian's legitimate daughter meeting her illegitimate half-siblings sent anxiety spiking through Elara. "She's 6. How do you explain this to a 6-year-old? "Honestly? As honestly as I can." Adrian's expression was troubled. "She knows her mother is gone. She knows I've been distant since Isadora died. Maybe having siblings will help her as much as it complicates things. Or maybe she'll resent them for existing. Maybe, but hiding them isn't fair to any of the children." He reached for Elara's hand. "I won't lie to Clara. Won't pretend Rowan and Lilia don't exist or that they don't matter. If that means difficult conversations and awkward adjustments, so be it." Elara wanted to argue, to protect her children from potential rejection, but she'd just finished telling Adrian she wanted real, messy truth instead of pretty lies. "All right," she said. 1 week. Then you come back, and we figure this out together." He left the next morning. The cottage felt emptier without him, which was absurd considering he'd only been part of their lives again for 3 days. But Rowan kept looking toward the door like he expected Adrian to walk through it, and Lilia asked twice when Papa was coming back. Elara threw herself into work to avoid thinking about it. She taught her regular classes, helped the Brennans with their spring planting, fixed the cottage's leaking roof. Physical labor kept her hands busy and her mind from spiraling into anxiety about all the ways this could fall apart. On the fourth day, Callum arrived. Elara was in the village square when she saw him dismount, looking travel-worn and serious. He spotted her and his expression shifted to something like relief. "Thank the heavens. I was worried I'd have to track you down again." "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I came to deliver something." He pulled papers from his saddlebag. "From Adrian. Legal documents acknowledging Rowan and Lelia, establishing a trust for their care and education, and—" he paused. "And a formal proposal." Elara's breath caught. "A proposal?" "Not that kind. At least, not exactly." Callum handed her the papers. "Read them." The first document was straightforward. Acknowledgement of paternity, provisions for the children's welfare, no claim to duchy inheritance, but guaranteed support. Fair and generous without being controlling. The second document made her hands shake. It was a proposal to establish a school in Cross Hill. A real school, with proper funding, paid teachers, resources for students who couldn't afford tuition. Adrian was offering to finance the entire thing, with one condition, that Elara run it. "You've already built something remarkable with nothing," he'd written in the margin. "Imagine what you could do with resources behind you. This isn't charity. It's investment in something I believe in someone I believe in." "He wants me to run a school," she said numbly. "He wants to give you the means to do what you're already doing, just on a larger scale." Callum's smile was knowing. "He also wants to make it harder for anyone to claim you're an unfit mother raising children in poverty. Hard to make that argument when you're headmistress of an endowed academy." Clever. It was protection disguised as opportunity, a way to secure her position while giving her agency instead of just throwing money at the problem. "What's the catch?" she asked. "No catch. The school is yours to run as you see fit. He's just providing funding and official backing." Callum shifted his weight, though I suspect he's hoping it'll give you a reason to stay in Cross Hill instead of running again if things get complicated. "I'm not running." "No, you're really not." Callum looked at her with open respect. "I misjudged you 7 years ago. Thought you were just another society girl playing at rebellion. I was wrong." The admission surprised her. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. I'm just stating facts." He pulled another envelope from his bag. "This one's personal. From Adrian to you. He asked me to deliver it in person." Elara took the letter, breaking the seal with unsteady fingers. "Elara, I'm writing this from the study where you found my journal. Strange how the same room can hold such different memories. The worst night of my life when I agreed to your father's blackmail, and the best when you appeared like a ghost I'd stopped believing in. Clara knows now. I told her yesterday. She cried, which broke my heart. But then she asked if her brother and sister were nice. Not whether she had to accept them or whether they'd take her place, just whether they were nice. Children understand things we complicate. I'm bringing her north in 3 days. I know you're nervous about the meeting, but Elara, she needs this. She's spent 6 years with a father who was physically present but emotionally absent, learning to take up less space to avoid being a burden. Rowan and Lelia might teach her it's okay to be loud and messy and take up space. And she might teach them what it means to share, to compromise, to make room for someone new. Or maybe I'm just hoping it works because the alternative is too hard to think about. The school proposal isn't manipulation. It's me trying to support what you're building without controlling it. You don't need me. You've proven that thoroughly. But maybe you want me anyway. Maybe we want each other, despite all the logical reasons we shouldn't. 3 days. I'll be there in 3 days. Adrian Elara read it twice, then folded it carefully and tucked it into her pocket. He's bringing Clara, she told Callum. I know. He's terrified. Good. He should be. But her tone was softer than the words. It's a lot. For all of us. Yes, but you've handled worse. Callum mounted his horse again. I'll be at the inn if you need anything. Adrian asked me to stay until he arrives, just in case. In case of what? In case you need someone to talk sense into you when you start overthinking and considering running again. His smile took the sting from the words. He knows you pretty well. After Callum left, Elara walked to the church and found Father Benedict organizing hymn books. I need advice, she said without preamble. The old priest looked up. unsurprised. I wondered when you'd come. Adrian wants to bring his daughter here, his legitimate daughter, to meet my illegitimate children, and he's proposed funding a school with me in charge. And I don't know if I'm ready for any of this. Are we ever ready for the things that change our lives? Father Benedict gestured to a pew. Sit. Tell me what you're afraid of. Elara sat. That it won't work. That Clara will hate Rowan and Lilia, or they'll resent her, or Adrian will realize that dividing his life between here and the duchy is unsustainable, that I'll lose what I've built trying to integrate something that doesn't fit. Those are all reasonable fears. That's not helpful advice. No, but it's honest. He smiled gently. Elara, you came here 7 years ago with nothing. You've built a life, raised children, become essential to this community. Do you really think you're so fragile that one complication will destroy all that? Maybe not destroy, but change it beyond recognition. Change isn't always loss. Sometimes it's growth. Father Benedict leaned back. You asked me once, years ago, if I thought you'd made the right choice leaving your old life. Do you remember what I said? That right and wrong were less important than whether I could live with the choice. And can you live with it? Elara thought about the cottage, the school, the children who called her mama, and the community that had closed ranks to protect her. Yes. Then ask yourself this. Can you live with saying no to Adrian? Can you live with never knowing if it might have worked? That was the question, wasn't it? The one that had been circling her thoughts since Adrian first appeared in Cross Hill. No, she admitted quietly. I don't think I can. Then you have your answer. The 3 days passed too quickly. Elara prepared the cottage obsessively, trying to make it presentable while keeping it authentically theirs. She talked to Rowan and Lilia about Clara, tried to prepare them for meeting a sister who'd had such a different life. Will she like us? Rowan asked for the 10th time. I hope so. But even if she doesn't at first, we'll give her time to adjust. This is hard for her too. Because her mama died and now she has to share her papa, Lilia said with her usual directness. Yes. That's sad. Lilia considered this seriously. We should be extra nice to her. That would be kind, Elara agreed, hoping it would be that simple. They arrived on a gray afternoon, 2 riders emerging from the northern road. Adrian and a small figure bundled in traveling clothes, dark hair escaping from beneath her hood. Elara's first thought was that Clara looked exactly like Isadora. Delicate features, careful posture, everything about her suggesting fragility. Her second thought was that the child's eyes were sharp and assessing, taking in Cross Hill with the same evaluating gaze Adrian used. They dismounted in front of the cottage. Adrian helped Clara down, keeping one hand on her shoulder like he was afraid she might bolt. Clara, he said gently, this is Elara, and these, he gestured to Rowan and Lilia, who'd come out to stare. These are Rowan and Lilia. Clara looked at her half-siblings with an expression Elara couldn't read. The twins stared back, equally uncertain. The silence stretched. Then Lilia, bless her, stepped forward. Hi, do you like frogs? Because we found a really good pond for catching them. Clara blinked. I've never caught a frog. Never? Rowan looked scandalized. What do you do for fun? I read and practice piano and study with my tutors. That sounds boring, Lilia announced. Lilia, Elara warned. Well, it does. Reading's good, but you need other things too, like frogs and climbing and getting muddy. Clara's lips twitched, almost a smile. I'm not allowed to get muddy. You are here, Rowan said firmly. Mama says getting muddy means you're actually living, not just existing. Adrian's eyes found Elara's over the children's heads, and she saw wonder there. This was working. Against all odds, it was actually working. Why don't you show Clara around, Elara suggested. Let her settle in before dinner. The twins grabbed Clara's hands. She looked startled but didn't pull away and dragged her toward the village. Adrian watched them go with an expression of profound relief. That went better than I feared, he said. The day's not over yet. True, but it's a start. He moved closer. The cottage looks good. You look good. Everything looks normal, Elara supplied. We've been practicing normal very hard. I could tell. His hand came up to her face, and this time she didn't pull away. I missed you. 3 days and I missed you like it had been years. Adrian, I know, too much too fast. But it's true. His thumb traced her cheekbone. I love you. I loved you 7 years ago. I loved you every day we were apart, and I love you now. That's not going to change regardless of what we decide about the future. The declaration should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like something settling into place. I love you too, she heard herself say. I think I hated you and loved you simultaneously for 7 years, which was exhausting. It's easier just loving you. He kissed her then, properly this time. Not the chaste promise of 3 nights ago, but something deeper and hungrier. 7 years of longing and loss and finding each other again poured into the kiss, and when they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Marry me, Adrian said. Elara laughed, surprised into it. You're supposed to build up to that. Why? We've already wasted 7 years. I don't want to waste more dancing around what we both want. His hands framed her face. Marry me. Not because of the children or society or duty, but because I want to spend every remaining day of my life proving I'm worthy of you. You're already worthy. Then marry me because you want to. Because we're better together than apart. Because, yes. The word came out before she'd consciously decided. Yes, I'll marry you. Adrian's expression transformed. He swept her up, spun her around like she weighed nothing, and kissed her again while she laughed against his mouth. We're going to have to tell the children, she said when he set her down. They already know. What? I asked their permission before I came. Rowan said it was about time, and Lelia asked if this meant she could be a princess. He grinned. I told her she could be whatever she wanted. Footsteps approached. The children returning, Clara between the twins looking disheveled and almost happy. Mama, Clara's never climbed a tree, Lelia announced. We have to fix that. Maybe after she's settled in, Elara suggested. She's wearing a dress, Rowan added critically. We need to get her proper clothes. You can't climb in that. Clara looked down at her expensive traveling outfit, then at the twins' practical homespun. I suppose you're right. Of course we're right. We're experts. Lelia tugged her hand. Come on, we'll show you Mama's room where she keeps the spare clothes. They disappeared inside. Adrian watched them go with wonder. She's different already, he murmured, more alive. Don't expect miracles. This is hour 1. I know, but still. He pulled Elara close. This could work. All of it. The children, the school, merging our lives. It won't be easy, but it could work. Elara leaned into him, letting herself feel the hope she'd been afraid to acknowledge. It better. I'm not doing this halfway. Neither am I. The wedding happened 3 months later in the church hall where Elara had faced down Hewitt. Simple and small, with the whole village in attendance plus Callum and a handful of Adrian's closest associates who'd made the journey north. Clara stood between Rowan and Lelia during the ceremony, the 3 of them in matching outfits that Martha had spent weeks sewing. They looked like siblings should, united, supportive, occasionally poking each other when they thought no one was watching. Elara wore a dress she'd made herself, cream-colored and practical, nothing like the elaborate gowns she'd worn to society events in her old life. Adrian wore simple traveling clothes, having left his ducal regalia back south. This wasn't a wedding designed to impress anyone. It was just 2 people who'd found each other again, making promises they intended to keep. I, Adrian Thorne, take you. Elara Vance. Formerly Vance, she interrupted, and he smiled. Take you, Elara, to be my wife. I promise to choose you every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. I promise to be present, reliable, and honest. I promise to earn my place in your life instead of assuming I deserve it. Elara's throat tightened. I, Elara, take you, Adrian, to be my husband. I promise to trust you with the parts of myself I've kept locked away. I promise to build with you instead of protecting myself from you. I promise to remember that we're stronger together than apart. Father Benedict pronounced them married, and the children cheered. The celebration afterward was loud and joyful, full of music and dancing and enough food to feed twice the number of guests. Clara approached Elara during a lull in the festivities. May I ask you something? Of course. Do you mind that I call you Elara instead of Mother? The question came out small, uncertain. Elara knelt so they were eye level. Clara, you had a mother who loved you. I'm not trying to replace her or make you forget her. I'm just trying to be someone else you can count on. But Rowan and Lelia call you Mama. They've never known anyone else. You have. It's different, and that's okay. Elara touched Clara's cheek gently. You can call me whatever feels right. There's no rush to decide. Clara considered this, then nodded. All right, can I still think about it? You can think about it as long as you need. The girl hugged her suddenly, fiercely. Elara hugged back, feeling something in her chest expand. When Clara pulled away, she said quietly, I like having siblings, even if they're weird about frogs. They're definitely weird about frogs, Elara agreed, smiling. The first year of marriage was harder than Elara had anticipated, and easier than she'd feared. Adrian split his time between Cross Hill and the Duchy, gradually shifting more responsibilities to trusted stewards so he could spend longer periods north. The arrangement wasn't perfect. There were weeks when Elara missed him desperately, times when the children acted out because their routine had been disrupted, moments when she questioned whether this was sustainable. But there were also mornings when she woke to find him already up, making breakfast with all three children. Evenings when Clara read to the twins while Adrian and Elara worked on school plans together. Nights when they lay tangled in each other, talking about everything and nothing until sleep claimed them. The school opened in the spring. A real building, professionally built, with desks and books and teaching materials Elara had only dreamed of. She hired 2 additional teachers, young women from Cross Hill, who'd benefited from her early teaching and wanted to give back, and enrollment swelled beyond expectations. Children came from surrounding villages, from farms and mining towns, from families who'd never imagined their sons or daughters might receive formal education. Elara taught literature and philosophy, drawing on her old education but adapting it for students who needed practical knowledge as much as theoretical. Clara attended classes alongside the twins, and watching the 3 of them bent over their studies, Elara sometimes had to blink back tears. This was what she'd fought for. Not perfection, not some fantasy where everything was easy, but something real and earned and worth the struggle. On the school's first anniversary, Adrian arrived from the Duchy with unexpected news. Parliament's passed new education reforms, he told her over dinner, partly because of what you've built here. They're using Cross Hill Academy as a model for rural education programs across the northern provinces. Elara stared. You're joking. I'm not. You've proven that proper education doesn't require wealth or status, just dedication and proper resources. Other communities want what you've created. He reached across the table for her hand. You're changing things, Elara, really changing them. We're changing them, she corrected. None of this happens without your support. Support is easy. You're the one doing the actual work. His expression turned serious. I have a proposal. Another one. I already married you. Different kind of proposal. The Crown wants to establish a commission on educational reform. They've asked me to recommend someone to chair it. He paused. I'm recommending you. Elara's breath caught. That's a government position. I can't just... Why not? You're the most qualified person I know. You've built something from nothing, proven it works, earned respect from people who'd normally dismiss a woman in your position. He squeezed her hand. Unless you don't want it, this is your choice, not mine. She thought about it, about how far she'd come from the frightened woman who'd fled her wedding 7 years ago, about the children sleeping upstairs who'd taught her that strength came in many forms, about the community that had believed in her when she barely believed in herself. I want it, she said. I'm terrified, but I want it. Adrian's smile was brilliant. Then it's yours. The commission work took her to the capital periodically, which meant leaving Cross Hill for weeks at a time. It was hard, harder than she'd expected, but Adrian took leave to stay with the children during her absences, and Martha's network of village support meant they were never truly alone. And when Elara returned from her first successful policy presentation to Parliament, when she walked into the cottage to find Adrian teaching the children to make bread while Clara lectured them on proper kneading technique, she knew with absolute certainty that this messy, complicated, imperfect life was exactly what she wanted. 2 years after the wedding, Callum arrived with yet another unexpected message. The Queen wants to meet you, he announced without preamble. Elara was in the school garden, helping students plant vegetables for the kitchen. She looked up, certain she'd misheard. What? Her Majesty has taken an interest in the education reforms. She wants to tour Cross Hill Academy and discuss expansion plans. Callum's expression was amused. You've become famous, Elara, or infamous, depending on who you ask. I don't want to be famous. Too late. You started a revolution, the small, quiet kind that changes everything without anyone realizing until it's already different. He handed her an official-looking envelope. She'll be here in 2 weeks. I'd suggest preparing. The royal visit was chaos. The entire village mobilized, cleaning, painting, practicing manners. The children were drilled on proper etiquette until Lilia complained she'd forget how to be normal. Adrian found the whole thing hilarious, which didn't help Elara's nerves. When the day arrived, she stood with Adrian and the children outside the school, watching the royal carriage approach. The queen emerged, younger than Elara expected, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Miss Elara," she said, and there was warmth in her voice. "Or should I say Duchess? I understand congratulations are in order." "Your Majesty." Elara curtsied, feeling ridiculous in the formal dress she'd borrowed from a duchess in the capital. "Welcome to Cross Hill." The queen toured the school, asking pointed questions and taking extensive notes. She watched classes, spoke with students, examined the curriculum. And when it was over, she requested a private meeting with Elara. They sat in Father Benedict's office, the only space that seemed appropriate for such a conversation. "You've built something extraordinary," the queen said, without preamble. "Not just a school, but a model for how education could work if we prioritized access over exclusivity." "Thank you, Your Majesty. I want to expand it, not just in the northern provinces, but across the kingdom, and I want you to oversee the expansion." The queen's gaze was steady. "This isn't a request I make lightly. It will mean significant time away from your family, considerable public scrutiny, and opposition from those who benefit from the current system. But it could change the future for thousands of children." Elara's heart pounded. This was bigger than anything she'd imagined, a chance to take what she'd built and multiply it across the entire country. "I need to discuss it with my family," she said. "Of course. But Elara," the queen leaned forward, "you've already proven you can build something from nothing. Now I'm asking you to build something from everything you've learned. Think about it." That night, Elara gathered Adrian and the children around the table. "I have something to tell you all," she began. "The queen has offered me a position overseeing educational expansion across the kingdom. It's an incredible opportunity, but it would mean I'd be away more often. I need to know how you feel about that." Silence. Then Rowan spoke. "Will you be happier if you do it?" The question caught her off guard. I don't know. Maybe? Then you should do it," he said simply. "You're always telling us to try things that scare us because that's how we grow. Why should you be different?" "Because I'm supposed to be here for you." "You are here for us," Clara said quietly. "Even when you're in the capital, we know you're fighting for something important. That matters too." Lilia nodded agreement. "Plus, when you're gone, Papa makes funny-shaped pancakes and lets us stay up late." Adrian laughed. "Throwing me directly under the carriage, are we?" "Just being honest." Lilia grinned. "But really, Mama, you should do it. We'll be okay." Elara looked at Adrian. "What do you think?" "I think you've spent 7 years building something extraordinary. I think you deserve to see it reach its full potential." He took her hand. "And I think we're strong enough now to handle the distance. It won't be easy, but nothing worth having ever is." She accepted the position the next day. The work was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. Elara traveled across the kingdom, establishing new schools, training teachers, fighting bureaucratic battles that made physical labor seem simple by comparison. She faced opposition from entrenched interests who saw expanded education as a threat to established hierarchies. But she also saw change happening. Schools opening in places where education had been impossible. Children learning who'd never had that opportunity. Teachers, many of them women, earning respect and independence through work they loved. And through it all, Adrian was her anchor. He managed the duchy remotely when possible, came to the capital when she needed support, ensured the children maintained stability even when their mother's schedule was chaotic. 5 years after the wedding, Elara returned to Cross Hill for a rare extended break. The children had grown, Rowan nearly to her shoulder, Lilia fast behind him, Clara blossoming into a thoughtful young woman who read voraciously and asked questions that made even her tutors think hard. They met her at the school, which had expanded twice since its founding. The building was full of students, full of noise and life and possibility. Adrian wrapped her in his arms. Welcome home. This is home, isn't it? She looked around at the village, the school, the children. After everything, this is still home. Always. That evening, they walked to the oak grove where Callum had first found her all those years ago. The trees had grown, the paths worn familiar by time and use. Do you ever regret it? Adrian asked. Leaving your old life? Elara thought about the woman she'd been. Frightened, betrayed, running from pain she didn't know how to process. Thought about the woman she'd become. Stronger, scarred, but genuinely happy in ways she'd never imagined possible. No, she said. I regret the lies and the manipulation. I regret the years we lost, but I don't regret what came after. Every hard thing taught me something. Every struggle made me stronger. Even being an unfit mother raising illegitimate children in poverty? He smiled as he said it, taking the sting from words that had once threatened to destroy her. Especially that. Those accusations forced me to prove what I already knew, that worth isn't measured by status or money, but by how you choose to live when everything's stripped away. Adrian pulled her close. You know what I think? What? I think you saved me as much as I saved you, maybe more. You showed me what real courage looks like, what it means to build instead of just maintain, what it means to fight for something beyond obligation or duty. We saved each other, Elara corrected. That's what love does. It makes both people stronger. They stood there as darkness fell, watching stars emerge one by one. Somewhere in the distance, they could hear the children's voices raised in laughter, could smell dinner cooking at the cottage, could feel the rhythm of a life they'd fought for and earned. It wasn't the life either of them had planned. It was better. Because it was real, built on truth instead of lies, on choice instead of obligation, on love that had survived the worst and emerged stronger. And as Elara stood there, Adrian's arms around her, and her children's voices carrying on the wind, she knew with absolute certainty that this messy, imperfect, beautiful life was exactly where she was meant to be. The end of the story wasn't perfect. Clara still struggled sometimes with sharing her father. Rowan developed a stubborn streak that reminded Elara uncomfortably of herself. Lilia asked uncomfortable questions about legitimacy and inheritance that had no easy answers. Adrian's dual life remained a constant balancing act. The work Elara did created enemies who didn't hesitate to attack her character or her past, but they faced it together, built solutions, made compromises, forgave mistakes, celebrated victories, learned that family wasn't defined by law or blood, but by the people who chose to show up day after day, even when it was hard. 10 years after she'd fled her sister's wedding, Elara stood in the expanded academy, now officially recognized as the Royal Academy of Northern Education, and looked out at an auditorium full of students, poor students, rich students, boys and girls from every background imaginable, all there because someone had finally decided that education was a right, not a privilege. Adrian sat in the front row with their children, all three of them, because in every way that mattered, Clara was as much theirs as the twins. They smiled at her, encouraging, supportive, proud. And Elara, who'd once thought her life was over, who'd built everything from nothing in a wind-beaten valley at the edge of nowhere, smiled back. This was legacy, not inherited through bloodlines or purchased with money, but created through determination and love and refusing to accept that the circumstances of your birth defined the limits of your future. She'd walked away from one life and built another, had transformed betrayal into strength, isolation into community, fear into courage. And she'd proven, beyond any doubt, that sometimes the best revenge against those who tried to destroy you wasn't vengeance at all. It was surviving, thriving, building something so real and solid and good that their lies couldn't touch it. It was living well,